Solovyov and Tsarist Russia in 1796. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 476. No decent peace for Prussia. There were still some things to talk about during the dinner, but they didn't talk about any military issues. Napoleon promised to give him a Medal of the Legion of Honor. Although this was ceremonial, it also represented recognition of the current situation. At least the French side was willing to accept peace talks. As for the specific conditions, the French attitude was obviously different from that of the Russian side. Because both sides had been fighting in Central Europe, they had not caused much damage to Russia except for the army. This led to the French wanting to negotiate, and Prussia was always the one being exploited. For Prussia, they were nominally equal to Russia in status, and they could also maintain consistency in diplomacy, so-called not being able to make peace with France alone. In fact, with the little force they had left, they were not even as strong as a division of the Russian army, and this was a division that had suffered war damage, which was only half the strength of the Guards. If they were completely subordinate, they would not have the right to sit at the table at all. While eating chicken, Napoleon did not forget to repeat this matter endlessly. Your Majesty, I think you should also know that you cannot force some dying beasts too hard. I know the Prussian army very well. I once lived in the Duke of Brunswick's house for a period of time. Once the oppression is excessive, it will definitely cause resistance. It's like, how should I put it, like the sound of the cannons in Valmy. The French people showed unprecedented patriotic enthusiasm. Not only the French will do this, I think people in many places will do this. Even the Serbs who are resisting the Ottoman Empire. When I was Deputy Minister of War, I had contact with the Serbs. Mishap, this is just your idea. Prussia is a fickle country, and I think your monarch should know that. If he hadn't rashly launched the war, maybe we wouldn't be fighting in Poland and East Prussia this winter, and we might still be around Berlin. In terms of strategy, campaign, and tactics, Prussia did nothing right, and even served as your Majesty's Minister of Logistics. After hearing this, Napoleon showed a contemptuous smile, of course towards Prussia. The nephew of the Empress, whom the Emperor had just recognized, actually had a sense of humor. Several marshals and generals at the table couldn't help laughing. Interesting, Mishap, you can continue. I can see that you don't like Germans. That may only be directed at Prussia, but not at Queen Louise and her children. After all, my benefactor, Her Royal Highness Elena, has a good relationship with her, and Archduke Nicholas may marry a German princess in the future, so I should be more careful with my words. Well, your words are very interesting. Since Napoleon asked him to continue, and since all the people at the table were French, no one would collude with Prussia and act as a traitor. He continued talking. They have assembled their army, but the warehouses, except for the warehouses in Königsberg, we have gained almost nothing. If it were in Russia, I would have asked the soldiers guarding the warehouses to goose step out of the warehouse gates and start to provide reinforcement to the corps. Moreover, that might make the war between us more intense, and the negotiations might be moved to another place. Since they were family members, Napoleon could still restrain himself at this moment, even though he spoke with a bit of thorns. Moreover, he denigrated Prussia too much, and even revealed the consistent friendly attitude between Prussia and Russia, and the possibility of marriage in the future. In fact, this also represents Alexander's intention. He still wants to protect Prussia, so he has to reveal some news. In short, now that peace is coming, you can go back and hand over the letter to your monarch. I will complete this task, and the subsequent peace talks should also be very smooth. Monarch to monarch, let's find a place in the middle of the Neman River, in Tilsit, which is very suitable. The task has been determined, and Alexander is now on his way to the bank of the Neman River. There must be some people who are opposed to the peace talks. Bagration saw that Osterman and Tolstoy opposed negotiating with the French, and took the initiative to come to him, and resigned from the post of commander of the 2nd Division. Langeron came from France, and he knew that, because he failed to defeat the French army, he would most likely go to Odessa, so he did not take the initiative to manage the affairs of the corps. In the end, he came to sign, and all these issues were handed over to Bagration to deal with. Although he could understand the peace talks, he did not support them. He did not have any comments on Oster and Tolstoy's current approach, but approved his resignation. But it would not be finalized until the peace treaty was officially signed. Don't be so anxious, Sasha. Maybe things will turn around. You'll know when Misha comes back. He used to be a diplomat. Although he was only a military attaché, he also knows diplomatic rhetoric. He probably won't be able to learn your kind of deception. But we didn't completely deceive the French. If Napoleon had returned to Spandau and Abstein at that time, the plan would have succeeded. That's just if. If the peace treaty is signed, I will leave the army and accompany my sick wife abroad for recuperation. How is your wife now? She is still as weak as before. The doctor can't do anything but use these recuperation methods. In addition, Miss wrote to say that the medicinal properties of American ginseng may have some problems in kitten medicine, but the medicinal effect can still be applied. Miss is an adjutant after all, and his military branch has always been infantry, but he is better at logistics. It's not surprising that he knows these things. But I have to thank him, at least my wife looks good. Speaking of you, Peter Ivanovich, you should invite your wife back. She is in Vienna like this. I have written to her to ask her to come back, at least to see the children, but she is recuperating in a hot spring resort in Hungary recently, and will not come back for the time being. Women's minds are sometimes difficult to guess. Even my wife who is lying on the bed is the same. But I'm optimistic about Miss Ha's marriage, although this boy actually has a woman outside. He is very handsome. It is not surprising that there are noble ladies who like him outside. Besides, isn't Miloradovich also liked by women? Miloradovich is a friend of women. The Empress had taken a fancy to him in the past, but the general went to study in Königsberg to avoid this matter. Ah, that's it. And the person in question is back. We were gossiping like Davidov before. Bagration turned the tables. After kicking the ball out, Davidov was listening beside him, and didn't expect that he would have a role. Sir, if you put it that way, it is the duty of the adjutant to get information, which is different from Misha who is only responsible for military intelligence. Although his military rank is much higher than Solovyov, since they were familiar with each other in the guards before, there is no problem in addressing each other like this. Ah, I'm doing well here, and this is a diplomatic event. If I mess up something during the meal, it will be troublesome. Fortunately, the French emperor recognized me as his nephew who is not related by blood. After all, my stepmother is his wife's cousin. Big news, Miss Cap, you always come up with something new. Davidov is a gossipy guy, and if he hears it, it will definitely spread, but it doesn't matter. I'm afraid that the uncle guarding the gate of the Ryazan Manor will know it in the future. He has already guessed this, but he just needs to compare the evidence with Bonaparte across the street. Bagration can't say that he has no objection to Davidov saying that he has a long nose and a long face, so this is all he has to say now. I have another mission, which is to sit here for a while. This letter will be handed over to the emperor with a signature. As for where to negotiate, a neutral area will be chosen. I think it should be on the Neman River. Go back and report. I still have coffee, if you need it. No, everyone in the French barracks drinks coffee. Give me black tea. You guys still can't live without black tea. Do you want snacks? The snacks here are too sweet. In fact, they are not good for health. They are good wartime food. After he said this, he was going back to Alexander to report. After all, he was very familiar with Alexander's groom. It only took 2 days to drive from St. Petersburg to the Neman River. The road conditions along the way were very good, and the speed was just right for peace talks. As for when he arrived at the headquarters of the Guards Division, only Grand Duke Constantine was there. How did you carry out your mission, Your Highness? It went very smoothly. Here is a letter to be delivered to the Emperor. Wait a minute. The Emperor will be here soon. His messenger will arrive when you cross the river. It's really fast. That Hercules is driving, as if he is flying. Many people in the army have objections to the negotiations. Can you notice it? Your Highness, what do you think? I think peace is also needed. As for you going there, how did Bonaparte behave? He behaved very calmly, as if victory was within his grasp, and he was also looking forward to meeting the Emperor. What did you talk about Prussia? Nothing, just some jokes. The French emperor did not even intend to give the king of Prussia any face during this meeting. He was completely treated as a fish on the chopping board, like Achina or Seth. That was probably the case. The fate of Prussia, I'm afraid, still needs the on-the-spot performance of the Russian emperor to be saved. In fact, Your Highness, the more troublesome thing is that the French emperor seems to have no need for Prussia to exist. His actions may disintegrate the country of Prussia. Destruction may be the worst choice. Even if the negotiations are more concessional, the country may lose most of its land, and also lose the occupied Polish land, and even some places that have long been controlled by Prussia. What did you say to me? There must be something hateful about pitiful people. We can only express regret that Prussia has become like this. Although Grand Duke Constantine is relatively close to Prussia, he obviously has a better impression of the French. Moreover, after Solovyov came back, he was only a representative of the army. Alexander always wanted to pay attention to the pomp and circumstance, and then he would send Prince Lobanov Rostovsky to represent the government. Speaking of which, Solovyov had taken a fancy to his little round-faced girl, but in the end, it went against his wishes, and got engaged to little Katia. Recently, there are rumors that the prince's daughter is going to have a blind date with Kirill from the Nereshkin family. But this is not the time to care about these things. Alexander always comes. At Grand Duke Constantine's place, Solovyov waited until dusk before the Russian emperor arrived. As for the title of Tsar, Grand Duke Constantine can sometimes be called that, which was granted by Paul. Your Majesty, this is a handwritten letter from the French emperor. Well done, Solovyov. The Minister of Foreign Affairs and his committee will handle this matter from now on. Now you don't need to return to the position of Chief of Staff of the Corps. Come back to be aide-de-camp. You are already a general. You don't need to be an aide-de-camp. Yes, Your Majesty, but His Majesty the Emperor of France may have some family relationship with me personally, which has been confirmed during this negotiation. Alexander didn't find it strange, and he was always abstract, and loved to be a riddle king, like a sphinx. After knowing that Solovyov's stepmother was from Martinique, he didn't care at first, and later when he sent Solovyov to Saint Domingue, he also noticed some special circumstances. He could associate it, but he thought the same as the parties involved, that without clear evidence and confirmation from both sides, there would be no such thing. And Solovyov is really useful. He has given him many surprises in the past year or so, and even defeated the French army twice. Napoleon himself came, and with the cooperation of Langeron, Bagration and others, he also fought a draw. This time, he retreated to the north bank of the Neman River without losing too many troops, and the main force of the Russian army was still intact. He is an official member of Napoleon's family, and it doesn't matter. It's not as easy to get along in Paris as it is in Petersburg. Besides, Solovyov raised this matter just to tell it in advance and avoid the Northern Sphinx from being too surprised. But seeing that he didn't react, Solovyov also felt that he was worrying too much. Alexander didn't express any opinion on the frankness of this attendant general, and his thoughts could only be guessed. But there is also one thing that is particularly clear, that is, since he has made contributions, he must be rewarded. Therefore, being transferred back to the Winter Palace to serve as an attendant general and returning to work in the general staff is a reward. Then, he opened the letter and looked at the basic conditions proposed by Napoleon based on the Russian peace request. The details still need to be discussed. However, this was very unfriendly to Prussia, and Alexander was indeed mentally prepared. Since he had formed an alliance with this ally, if Russia chose to negotiate at this time, it would always have to protect Prussia, but it would also have to sacrifice the interests of this country to allow France and Russia to finally negotiate peace. Chapter 477, The Meeting of the Two Emperors at Tilsit. You are still very honest, but I always feel that, Solovyov, you must be hiding some secrets from me. Although Alexander has signs of boldness, his face. He said this without any evidence, but there is also some woman's intuition in it. Although the relationship between Solovyov and Larissa has never been exposed, and there are even other people who are taking the blame, it is always easy to be speculated because of his close relationship with the royal women. Of course, he has been serving in the palace since he was 17 years old, so it is not surprising that he has a good relationship with these young ladies. In addition, he is really good at taking care of children, so it is inevitable that he is always sent to work in the palace. Even when he is forced to do it, he can even do the work of his life. Your Majesty, I think everyone has secrets that they don't want others to know. That's true. You had a hard time recuperating in the Yelgova palace. Maria was always pestering you when she was still unmarried, and she is still like this, even now that she has become a mother. It is really hard for you to take care of her. Of course, he also wanted to complain about his brother-in-law. What a strange arrangement. Maria always liked to pester Solovyov, and she was very proactive. Unmarried Ekaterina also had this problem, and she was even more unscrupulous because of her brother's love. Alexander thought about it. Girls raised in pairs at home are all like this. Alexandra and Elena, Maria and Ekaterina, his own sisters are like this, and his daughters also have this tendency, especially the twins. Although the difference between them is getting bigger and bigger, they are still quite tacit because they came out of the same mother's womb. Moreover, they pretend to be innocent in front of adults when they get into trouble, which deceives Queen Mother Maria. But if Maria likes it, let her do it, but it is more troublesome. As for Solovyov, he didn't have to worry too much, and there wasn't much for him to do later. He only needed to accompany the Tsar to the bank of the Neman River as an attendant general, and follow the arrangements for the rest. Your Majesty, if there's nothing else, go away. Solovyov, you've worked very hard. There were indeed many objections to the negotiation in the army, and it was rare for someone like Solovyov to advocate war and be willing to be an envoy. As for what others thought, Solovyov didn't want to care, and now he just wanted to go to sleep. He hadn't had a good rest for many days. After the meeting was arranged, Napoleon was setting up the venue. Even the Russian soldiers stationed on the shore could see the French engineers building a platform over there. This is really a good show. The French emperor is quite showy. Only when our emperor comes will he take it seriously. It would be better if it were our German allies. That's what he said. As for the meeting in Tilsit, Alexander did have to make some gestures. As an old actor who had been acting between his grandmother and father since he was a child, he was still thinking about how to deal with Napoleon, an aggressive guy. After all, this was the first time they met. In this case, he was also writing his own script, and by the way, he looked at the miniature in his pocket watch. The miniature was twins. He liked these two children very much, and such a miniature portrait was very vivid. The two children were so naughty. After Napoleon built this platform in the middle of the Neman River, he took Terek and Courland Court to it, and waited for the arrival of the Tsar. On this platform built with boats, there were also old guards on duty. Since the French emperor arrived first, he was waiting for the arrival of the Russian emperor. Alexander also rode to the north bank of the Neman River, where the generals led by Grand Duke Constantine were accompanying him. Brother, do you really want to go by yourself? What's the matter? In diplomatic occasions, credibility is always important. Nothing will happen. He was wearing a Prussian guard's uniform, standing upright on a small boat with 4 guards as oarsmen, holding the pole. That Tsar looks really arrogant, Your Majesty. This is a gesture, but we also welcome him to negotiate here, don't we? Courland Court? While Napoleon and his entourage were looking at the Tsar, Alexander said this directly when the boat approached. Like you, I also hate the British attitude of giving orders. Do you think so too? If anyone is going to give orders to Europe, it should be France. The context of this sentence should take into account that Russia is not included in the Europe that Alexander mentioned. Welcome here, Alexander. Then Napoleon stretched out his hand and pulled Alexander out of the boat, and then the two began to hug. If this is a proper Russian etiquette, they have to kiss each other, but it looks a bit strange to these two people. After seeing the two emperors hugging on both sides of the Neman River, the soldiers of the French and Russian armies began to shout, "Long live the Emperor and Führer." It seems that our soldiers are happy to see this result. Yes, I hope this will be a pleasant meeting. Then, the two of them showed a fox-like smile, and under the background of the Neman River, it was more like a gathering of two conspirators than two emperors. As for the subsequent arrangements, it was naturally arranged for the entourage of both sides to be stationed in the town of Tilsit. Napoleon did not consider the King of Prussia at all. He only arranged the decorations with N&A, French eagle flags and Russian double-headed eagles, to represent the emperors of France and Russia, and did not consider the black eagle of the King of Prussia and the letters FW of their kings. However, from Solovyov's perspective, it was reasonable not to include the King of Prussia. No matter how you look at it, this king is a foolish son who inherited the family fortune, has a virtuous wife and a group of brave generals, and then does very prodigal things. Alexander could only ensure that Prussia would eventually join the talks, but that was only the status of Czechoslovakia in the Munich Agreement. Being able to get Frederick William III to the table was the best this ally could do. Then Alexander's entourage also took a boat across the river and stayed in Tilsit. Napoleon also gave up the best house he could find in the town of Tilsit to Alexander, and renovated it, and even moved many things from Warsaw and Berlin. Solovyov was very responsible in placing the luggage and being responsible for security when he arrived at the post of aide-de-camp. At this time, Napoleon saw Solovyov still examining carefully, so he said to Alexander, "It seems that the relationship between our two sides is much closer than expected. Why do you say that?" "Alexander, the first military envoy you sent, Major General Solovyov, is my wife's nephew." "Ah, you mean his stepmother is the cousin of Queen Josephine, right? It seems that you know it too. But there must be sufficient evidence. Miss Had was a guard in the Guards when my father was alive. He is very careful in his work and will not act unless he is very sure. He is indeed an outstanding young man, but why didn't Queen Elizabeth come here?" "Are you talking about my wife? She has been recovering after giving birth, and we have 6 daughters, and the children always need their mother's care. In addition, you should also know that the family members of the Elector of Baden are all very family oriented. This is true. Karl Ludwig is a good father-in-law in Europe. Married daughters prefer family life and don't like life in social circles. Yes, my son Eugene is married to Bavaria, and Queen Caroline is the sister of Queen Elizabeth. We actually have a very close relationship. The intersection of this complex chain of relationships is Bavaria and Baden, and Jerome is going to marry the Princess of Württemberg recently. They are here, and the content of the negotiations has not made much progress, but they are trying to make friends." Solovyov was checking the residents on the side. He heard this situation in his ears. Although he had psychological expectations, he did not expect that the two of them had been chatting like this all the time. But he still has to do his duty. Think about it, watching Frederick William III wearing an ordinary soldier's uniform on the shore, which is pitiful enough, and it fits the initials of his name very well. In this place, you can also see how Alexander tries his best to protect the interests of his allies to the minimum extent. In fact, Prussia is not worth protecting like this. It was too bad a teammate before. But Alexander still pays more attention to diplomatic credibility. At this time, he also tries his best to protect Prussia. It's just that Napoleon has not yet started the corresponding topic, and Alexander can only try his best to deal with it and try to find a suitable topic. After a while of relatives and confirming the complicated relationship, Napoleon recognized this nephew for Josephine and asked Eugene, who was with the army, to come and recognize him. After a series of operations were completed, he mentioned the main topic. "Well, now we can also discuss how to draw the boundaries of Europe. Alexander, we are finally getting to the point. If the Vistula River is used as the border, this river will pass through Poland. The existence of such a small country the existence of Poland is still very necessary. It happens to be between our spheres of influence. Wouldn't you reconsider it? If the Polish issue can be resolved, I can send representatives to negotiate with Britain to restore comprehensive peace in Europe." Napoleon did not respond. Alexander could actually read from his expression that, although the issue of Poland had to be put on hold, he was still very interested in the issue of peace talks with Britain. There was just a small problem. The last time Alexander proposed that Britain and France make concessions, the British arrogantly refused to give up Malta, and the French side was just making a gesture. This time it was the same. Although Napoleon was interested, he did not make any substantial concessions. Alexander also said this verbally. In fact, if the British knew that Russia and France were negotiating, they would probably make some small moves. This issue was mentioned by Solovyov when he reported in St. Petersburg. Speaking of which, European countries are well aware of the various small moves of the British to start a war without declaration. Even Denmark, which has relatives by marriage, has been beaten several times. This is a traditional skill. Maybe one day it will become a blow to my friendly army. Therefore, this kind of probing is just to show friendship to each other. What can really be achieved? If it is pure peace, then the two countries will probably divide the sphere of influence. If it is to form an alliance, that is another matter. But Napoleon's attitude is obviously negotiable. The two sides sat down to continue in-depth discussions, and they had to establish relations with Prussia. After we have fully exchanged views, there should be another question. That is, Prussia is also a party to the matter. Can the King of Prussia also join this meeting? It's already late today. We are only talking about the traditional friendship between France and Russia. As for the Prussian issue, we can put it off until tomorrow. Napoleon said this, which naturally proved one point. Prussia is just fish on the chopping board, waiting for a knife to cut it. For Alexander, this is also fulfilling his obligations as an ally. At least the King of Prussia will not shrink in Memel, thus avoiding the fate of national destruction. However, unlike the situation of France and Russia, Prussia will have to cut its flesh. Our friendship and the peace that is to come are based on the cooperation between our two countries. But you should also note, Your Majesty, that this peace is brought by the French army, if necessary. French is a wonderful language, but it is so cruel when you speak it. If you do not agree to peace, the cruel consequences that will follow, I think you will also be very clear. Does it also include peace and freedom? Does this freedom include the freedom of 20 million Russian serfs? Your Majesty, you cannot change everyone. Russia also has its own national conditions here. Well, it is quite a strange situation if my great king has its own national conditions here. But Napoleon also agreed to serve the dishes, and the King of Prussia could only appear in such an embarrassing situation. The price to be paid for this will be very high. The land to be ceded is not only the elite industrial area west of the Elbe River, but also includes Poland's independence. An independent Grand Duchy of Poland will be established on this part of Polish land ceded by Prussia, with France's Saxon ally as a puppet monarch, which is actually controlled by the French. And further negotiations will indeed depend on the situation. To make a final decision, the peace talks have finally begun. Chapter 478. The King of Prussia is as useless as his abbreviation. Although Tilsit has disappeared in the 21st century and its name has been de-Germanized to become Sovietsk, the scale of this town is not too big or too small, which is acceptable. After Alexander settled down, he was very satisfied with the hospitality of the French side. However, after settling down, he also had some concerns. Your Majesty, what are you worried about? Nothing, but we don't know what price the French side will propose. The previous correspondence only confirmed the scope of discussion. From the perspective of the French Emperor, they were more tolerant of Austria's peace terms before. What about us? No French soldier can enter Russian territory as a soldier. The initiative of the price of this negotiation condition is naturally on our side. Although he said so, Alexander also knew that France's attitude towards Prussia should be very harsh. He didn't care what would happen to Prussia, but St. Petersburg was sometimes like the Blue House, and he always had to protect his subordinates, so he talked about this with the foreign minister. Badberg naturally understood what he meant. He had also been Alexander's teacher, and he knew that his students loved to be riddlers. However, for Prussia, the situation was not so optimistic. From the Meuse River to Memel, now only Memel was truly left. The Prussian King Frederick William III was in an unusually depressed state at this time. When the war was going well, he had close contact with the Queen for a while. He was in a trance these 2 days. Because he didn't know what Napoleon was going to do, the Queen was still holding on. She entrusted the girls to the Duke of Saxe-Weimar and his family, preparing to take them to St. Petersburg, while the sons remained in Memel. The Queen herself took a carriage to the Lithuanian town of Panamun on the north bank of the Neman River, accompanying the king to wait for the judgment of fate. Speaking of which, the judgment of this fate was judged by Napoleon and Alexander. The king was so depressed that Queen Louise, as the princess of the weaker of the two Mecklenburg families, married the Prussian prince for the benefit of her family. The two had lived together for a long time and had a very deep relationship. However, the king that the queen saw now did not even have the ambition to reform the country through internal affairs a few years ago. Only she could help this unfortunate FW to regain his spirits. Don't be like this. We have to think on the bright side. Both Schwerin and Weimar are related to the Russian royal family. Alexander will definitely help them. There is room for us to maneuver. Louise, there's no point saying this at this time. You're just comforting me. Now it seems that it's unknown whether we can return to Berlin. You don't know much about the situation in the Russian court, so don't be so decadent. When Maria and I lived together, I heard her say that Grand Duke Nicholas's teacher, Baron Solovyov, chief of staff of the East Prussian Corps, seemed to be helping Grand Duke Nicholas find a fiancé. How old is Nicholas? The Russian royal family may be anxious to marry off their daughters, but they are not short of heirs now. The two young Grand Dukes will not be in a hurry for marriage, right? But the Emperor and Grand Duke Constantine have no sons, only daughters, so this matter will also attract their attention. Although Nicholas is only 11 years old, he is tall and strong, a child with the physique of a teenager, and handsome. He should be better than his brother in the future. Maybe this is still a temporary choice. Although Charlotte is still young, she should be married after she turns 14. We can make preparations early. If there are rumors of such a marriage, the French should not treat us too harshly. As a queen and wife, she is indeed very virtuous and has a very thorough plan. But Frederick William III is still in a very decadent state and even began to ignore the queen. If you are like this, it really hurts my heart. The queen finally couldn't control her emotions, covered her face and cried, and left the small reception room and returned to the bedroom. As a king, Frederick William III relied on his uncle to fight wars and his wife to handle diplomacy. He was only good at domestic affairs, but he was so cowardly that he made the queen very sad. That is to say, the children are not around. Otherwise it would be difficult for them to forgive their father for being so wooden. You know, as a mother, Louise also taught her children carefully and also found famous teachers for the princes. Although other conditions are limited, there is always Clausewitz who comes back in the field of military science. This man is indeed loyal, and as a teacher, he began to educate the Crown Prince and Prince William very responsibly. For the daughters, Charlotte loves music. Although she has no talent, she is also studious. The queen did not have a court band to accompany her during the war. Maria is usually willing to play with her children, because Queen Louise is a good friend of their sisters, so she can still help. In terms of state affairs, the queen does have some skills. She invited the prestigious old Duke of Brunswick to come out, but the warmongers within the Prussian army eventually destroyed all the plans, and it has come to this point. Queen Louise cried while covering her heart, and her chest tightness became more and more serious. Seeing this, the maid came over to help Louise to the bed and went to find a doctor. It doesn't matter. God won't call me now. But she was indeed weak when she spoke now. She looked so sick that the maids around her were crying. They had been with the queen for a long time and knew that if it weren't for the queen's tough and strong character, the king would have succumbed to the iron hoof of the French army long ago, and his end would be much worse than that of Austria. Of course, the other two parties in the talks did not know the current situation of the Prussian couple at this time. Queen Louise knew that relying on the personal relationship between the royal families, Alexander would try to find a way out for Prussia, but it was only the minimum. If France and Russia want to make peace, they must sacrifice the interests of Prussia and other countries, especially if they want to form an alliance. Alexander actually proposed to introduce the King of Prussia to Napoleon the next day. Napoleon unexpectedly agreed to Alexander's request and was very tolerant. However, he was a tolerant and narrow-minded person. Solovyov got up very early the next morning. After all, the king was like that. He got up at 5 o'clock every morning. The worst thing about being a general of the aide-de-camp was that he had to accompany the emperor every day when performing official duties. It was more troublesome than the shift duty he had in the guards. However, because there were many generals of the aide-de-camp, he still had the opportunity to take turns. But in Tilsit, only he and Volkonsky, who were the people Alexander trusted more, could be brought here. Begia, is your majesty up? Volkonsky did not reply, but just pointed to the end of the corridor. Solovyov, you should improve the performance of the product. This toothpaste, it foams too much. Okay, your majesty. Many of the daily necessities used by the royal family were from his Little B brand, but Alexander did not usually say this, but today he took out some of the second party. Solovyov also knew that, if his position was not a general of the aide-de-camp again, Alexander would not tell him this. Before today's formal talks, Alexander had to introduce the Prussian king and queen to Napoleon. It was easy to invite Queen Louise, as King FW was really useless. If a formal royal meeting was really to be held, then Queen Josephine, Solovyov's aunt, would have to come, as well as Larissa, who was taking care of the children at home. It was also her ability to let the queen appear. Alexander knew that there were always ways to open up the topic. Not only the queen, but also the Baden sisters, who had always been stay-at-home girls, and the always criticized Queen of Cake, were all very good at playing their roles in such social occasions. As for the ridiculous fact that the Black Duke was worried that his wife would be targeted by Napoleon and sent her to Sweden, Napoleon finally said that we were all family, so how could I let my son-in-law's sister remarry? Solovyov, please invite King Frederick William to come here. I have agreed to introduce him and his wife to the French Emperor, your uncle. But I saw that the king was not in good condition before crossing the river. Will it have any impact? It doesn't matter. The queen will find a way. But Queen Louise has always been in poor health. When I saw her at the Jelgava Palace, she was like that. But at this time, to save Prussia, I'm afraid they have to work hard on their own. If you can't rely on the king, then you have to ask the queen to come. Solovyov thought about many aspects. Although Queen Louise was 31 years old, she was very charming and treated people gently and politely. She would respect even people of low status. She looked weak on the outside, but she was very strong on the inside. But calling the queen over, according to the wildest unofficial history, the people in the Bonaparte family are all very lustful, especially Napoleon and Lucien, who are the most capable. Men like beautiful women, and women like handsome young people. Only the fourth son Louis is more like his mother. But his family's affairs are another matter. Solovyov still remembers a rumor in Petersburg, that is, the Duke of Enghien was almost killed because Napoleon was also there when he was having an affair with the famous young actress Miss George. As for whether Napoleon was Archduke Carol's patient and could twitch and fall to the ground, he still has some say. This middle-aged Corsican with a big head and a thick neck is very healthy. If he also has epilepsy, could it be caused by hemorrhoids? In short, he didn't care about those things, but just followed orders to greet the King of Prussia. Of course, the king's words. Now he is like a wilted eggplant, with his head drooping, which is really hard to describe. The queen dressed up carefully, just like what she saw in the portrait. Such light makeup was indeed very beautiful, much better than the terrible powder of the Bourbon royal family. Your Majesty, General Solovyov of the Guards, under the order of His Majesty the Emperor of our country, has come here with his guards to greet you. Well, General, thank you for your hard work all the time. Frederick William III could not say anything to Solovyov, but just said this indifferently. Many of the French and vassal troops destroyed in this war were his achievements. Even in the end, in order to preserve strength, he advocated the retreat of the entire Russian army. As an ally, the monarch could not say anything. But the queen looked at him with a meaningful look. General, it's hard to imagine that you and the French emperor are related. Queen Josephine is my stepmother's cousin, and also my aunt. The French emperor is my uncle, but I was the most fierce one in the war with the French. In peacetime, I can rely on relatives, but on the battlefield, I'm either an ally or an opponent. The queen was very satisfied after hearing this. This young general was still very reliable. She smiled back, and when the king got into the car decadently, she saw that her husband was useless today, so she asked this Russian general to help her get into the car. When the queen stretched out her hand, Solovyov also understood. Your Majesty, I'm happy to serve you, but you and your Majesty should pay more attention. According to the progress of yesterday's negotiations, our emperor will try his best to fight for it, but the attitude that the French emperor may take is not the same as that towards Austria. Queen Louise also knew this. After she was helped into the car, she whispered a few words to her FW king husband. This made this decadent guy cheer up a little. At least he should not lose face in formal occasions. As for the couple's arrival at the meeting site, Napoleon, introduced by Alexander, was acquainted with the King and Queen of Prussia, and they also had to negotiate further. However, Napoleon also noticed Queen Louise, who was indeed very beautiful. Fortunately, the dirty talky, Caulaincourt and Dirk made up about the Queen, was all said privately when the three of them were drinking coffee. There was no need to take it back, and no outsiders knew about it. Mishap. Look at the Emperor of France, your uncle. The way he looks at Queen Louise. Davidov came here to take duty today, and now the Russian generals in Tilsit all know about Solovyov's relationship. It was this big-mouthed guy who dared to say this to Solovyov in front of him. Speaking of which, when Davidov's brother was captured, he was also received by Napoleon. After hearing this, Solovyov said helplessly, if people with this status cannot hide their thoughts like the emperor, it's probably like this. Solovyov had experienced this too well when he was with Paulina. He didn't know what would happen to the queen today. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 479, Russia and Prussia have different prices. Queen Louise was actually prepared for this situation. Her husband was really useless in diplomatic occasions. If she asked him to negotiate, it would be a very bad choice. At this point, Alexander's guarantee was unreliable. Although there was still room for maneuver from the perspective of her personal relationship with Elena and her husband's contact with the Russian royal family, the French were the key factor in forcing Russia to negotiate in the end. The fate of Prussia, I'm afraid, can only be avoided by her own efforts. Moreover, she was not doing this for her husband, but for her children. As a mother, she had to make greater sacrifices. In diplomatic negotiations, these entourages would not enter the venue. Solovyov took this opportunity to meet with Eugene. After all, they were cousins in name only. If they really had to talk about blood relations, Anton might be closer to him. But he also needed an introducer. Solovyov had become familiar with the Marquis of Caulaincourt after several negotiations. It seemed more appropriate to ask him to help. Baron, you want me to introduce you to the Prince of Venice? Yes, everyone in the barracks knows about this relationship now. I'm happy to serve you. We may have frequent dealings in the future. Although it sounds incoherent, Caulaincourt should come to St. Petersburg later. Napoleon's initial ambassador to Russia was Savary, but Caulaincourt should be more suitable. He quickly became familiar with many Russian generals. Solovyov, under the leadership of Caulaincourt, came to Eugene's side. Your Highness, I think you should also know that Her Royal Highness the Queen has some relatives in Russia, and you have even fought against each other before. It was cousin Mikhail, right? We did fight in front of the pontoon bridge in Poltusk, but you used retreat as bait and finally lured the Poles into the trap. It was a brilliant strategy. If you hadn't led the grenadiers to build a position, I would have succeeded in capturing the bridge if it had been someone else. If mother knew that Aunt Amy was whereabouts, she would probably be very happy, but she is far away in Malmaison, not here. There is no rush. Now that peace has been made, a peace treaty should be signed between our two countries. If there is a chance, our whole family can also visit Paris, and Aunt Josephine should have seen me. I went to Paris when I was on a mission a few years ago. You should have been a military attaché in Paris, right? I've heard about you. I thought you were a reckless guy like those cavalry officers, but I didn't expect you to be a gentle and polite person. After all, 6 people were defeated in a duel in one day. It's hard not to become famous. It's just that the news in each region is different. That is, more people in Paris know about this. And you also killed General Cadada. Although it was an accident and a misunderstanding, this should have helped His Majesty. At that time, it was a heavy blow to friendly forces, and the flood washed away the Dragon King Temple. What is that? Eugene couldn't know a lot of Chinese allusions. Solovyov realized that what he said was beyond the scope, so he changed his words and said, it's like Zeus struck his own temple with lightning. This statement should be okay, right? Yes, your knowledge is not like that of a general, but more like that of a Greek scholar. Doesn't the emperor also like science? Only in peacetime can there be time to study. With this talk, the topic was opened. Then Eugene asked about Solovyov's family situation. He had only heard about this aunt he had never met, and his mother and grandfather mentioned her. Aunt Amy lived on the east side of the island. She was 5 years older than him, and the youngest of his mother's generation. When she arrived in mainland France, she spent most of her time in the church boarding school in Nantes. However, he was more concerned about family matters. He knew where his parents and stepfather's relatives were. Moreover, Eugene's personality was also quite popular. His youngest son later became the son-in-law of the Russian royal family and came to St. Petersburg. This is not bad. At least my aunt's life is very happy. It's just that my father is this age, you know. Having a young wife, he always has to dress up with jewels and gems to be satisfied. Indeed. Eugene, your wife is a princess of Bavaria, right? Yes, that's right. Is your family okay? I miss August a little when I'm away on the battlefield. Speaking of which, your wife, the current Queen of Bavaria, is the elder sister of our queen. Of course, there are still some things that cannot be said. But August is the daughter of the former Elector August Wilhelmine. She should be from Hesse-Darmstadt, and she is related to the Queen of Prussia. Aren't you her brother-in-law? Eugene listened and smiled without saying anything. This cousin really knows how to make connections and knows the market, but it's a pity that he is a Russian. And Paulina, who opposed her mother, should still have some feelings for him, which is really wonderful. That's right. We are in talks now. The peace between Russia and France is equal, but with Prussia, this may not be the case, right? Eugene, do you know anything about the situation? I don't know. The emperor will not want me to participate in diplomatic affairs unless there is a separate agreement with Italy. His official title is Viceroy of Italy, which means he is in charge of Italy on behalf of Napoleon, and this appointment was earlier than that of his brothers. It looks like it's still a secret. And the Iron Crown of Italy is also one of the titles of His Majesty the Emperor. You have to remember that. Solovyov knew it in his heart, but since he and Eugene were sitting here chatting, he couldn't help asking questions. It's true that Eugene was a chatterbox, but he didn't say a word of truth, and Solovyov couldn't get any information out of him. Of course, he wouldn't dig a hole here if his relatives, France, and Russia wanted peace. If they were to fight in the future, that would be another matter. As for Alexander and Napoleon, there was probably a result. Russia's own sphere of influence would remain unchanged, except for a few islands on the Adriatic Sea that had to be handed over to France. Russia would not suffer any losses, and the two sides would still be allies. As for the King of Prussia, Alexander lived in the best house in the local area, and the King of Prussia was arranged in the mill. Because the Queen was a female relative, she was arranged to live in another place. This arrangement was indeed quite clever. Solovyov always felt that Napoleon was using the story of the miller and the king to make a point. This Corsican was quite funny. As for the negotiation stage, Napoleon and Alexander were soon arm in arm and were already brothers. But Prussia was obviously not treated this way. Even now Frederick William III was withering again. His wife encouraged him, but he was always useless. At this time, Queen Louise had no choice but to make up her mind and stomp her feet. She went to negotiate with Napoleon in person. However, King FW of Prussia also saw Napoleon's lustful look towards his wife. It is indeed beneficial to have a beautiful wife, but Napoleon likes beautiful women, but it is unlikely to be so rash. Russia only paid a few islands in the Adriatic Sea and got the Bialystok area, but for Prussia, this loss was huge. Louise was so anxious because she heard that, if no action was taken, Prussia would return to the territory of the Elector of Brandenburg and might even be cut into small pieces for making sauce. Louise's sister married Frederick William III's brother and became a widow. If that was the case, she would be treated the same as Mecklenburg and Saxony. With this rumor, she was also fidgeting on the chair in her residence. If that's the case, then it will be the same as our relatives in the south. The Red Eagle Medal was awarded from the branch of the Hohenzollern family, but the Duke sold his territory and title to his family, and the Red Eagle Medal came with it. If it was divided like this, it would be difficult for the Hohenzollern family to turn over in the future, let alone the Kingdom of Prussia. She thought of her children, and became somewhat anxious. Looking at her husband, he was in such a cowardly state now, and she still needed to take action herself, and Napoleon really wanted to see her. Frederick, it looks like I have to go. Louise, if this is the outcome, then my children will have to separate from Saxony and Weimar and Gotha, and have to rely on others. My dear, when I married you, you were also a crown prince, and you don't know the difficulties of our small countries. If you marry a princess from a big country, you are looking for a backer. Like my sisters, we married into your family, to give our daughters a support, and the son-in-law's family has power to rely on. If our children are to be bullied in a small country, and can only rely on marrying our daughters to avoid disaster, it is better to be a civilian, and not be subject to these constraints. Even if they are penniless, at least they can still be free. After she said this, the King of Prussia had to agree. Napoleon was looking forward to the meeting with Queen Louise. After all, compared with the timid king, this Valkyrie was still a rival. If he talked with the King of Prussia, even if there was any result, I'm afraid others would laugh at him for not being a martial artist. Well, speaking of it, Napoleon sometimes paid attention to his reputation. Monkey King didn't have to rob the things he cheated from the Silverhorn King. The British often started fighting over a disagreement. After Solovyov and Eugene chatted, they walked back from the house, where the French generals were staying. He was also sharp-eyed, and saw Queen Louise and her husband talking on the second-floor balcony. After the Queen finished speaking, the King turned around and left. Now only the Queen was there wiping tears. It seems that Prussia has only gone through 2 generations, and it has become useless. It will take at least 60 years for it to rise again. The king is useless, and the queen has to come forward. However, Prussia can't even get the guards of the guards together. Their cuirassiers don't have breastplates, so they are shabby. If Queen Louise goes out, she has to be escorted by Russian soldiers. Alexander then sent out a small team of guards to escort the queen to Napoleon's residence. When the French and Russian monarchs were talking, the sky was still clear, but when Queen Louise was about to meet Napoleon, it began to rain. Solovyov knew the queen before, and he was on duty, so he had to do this. Your Majesty, if I go, do I have to avoid suspicion? Alexander just smiled and said, Solovyov, it's appropriate for you to go. If someone else goes, I'm afraid your uncle, the Emperor, will not give him face. Your Majesty, anything else you want to say? His Royal Highness Nicholas is 11 years old this year. In a few years, he should be arranged to get married. There's no rush for this. You must have some ideas. I think Queen Louise's eldest daughter, Princess Charlotte, is a good choice, but the 2 princes are still very young. Hearing this, Alexander knew that this teacher really did things for the students, but this method was also a bit funny. You are so nice. You still want to be a matchmaker, but now you have to escort Queen Louise. This was considered as tacit consent. He did not say anything more. He just prepared horses and vehicles to send Queen Louise over. The rain was getting heavier and heavier. Queen Louise was wearing thin clothes. It was summer, but the weather suddenly turned cold. Your Highness, please put on this coat first. The Queen of Prussia, wearing a coat of a Russian general, went to talk with Napoleon. Solovyov was waiting outside and saw the King of Prussia waiting outside. He looked like this. King Frederick the Great was still fighting for 3 skirts back then. Who would have thought that his nephew's son would inherit the throne, but the country was almost destroyed. He went from being the King of Prussia to the Mayor of Memel. The Queen looked pitiful, and she had been sick since the war began, which made her look even more pitiful. She was to be sent to Napoleon, but the Prussian king was jealous and followed behind on horseback. When they arrived at the place, he was anxious to walk around outside. Seeing him like this, Solovyov was also a little embarrassed. After all, Queen Louise was the queen of a country, and Napoleon could not be so casual. The 2 sides did talk inside, but Rustam was guarding the door, and there were guards standing guard around, so it was obviously not allowed to enter. It was unlikely that he wanted to learn from Mr. Talleyrand to walk slowly and eavesdrop at the door. Even people from the French side were not allowed to approach casually. It had only been a short while since they talked, and Frederick William III could not hold back. After all, he was a king and had not abdicated, and the old guards could not stop him. It's only been a short while, and you can't wait. It's really the same as the spelling of your name. But when the Prussian king broke in, he saw Napoleon and Queen Louise standing face to face against the window. It was obvious that he was overthinking at this stage. As for Napoleon, when he saw this scene, he also wanted to say some dirty words to humiliate King FW and praise the Queen. Chapter 480 Queen Louise, you don't want your husband to know, right? Frederick William III thought that his wife and Napoleon had been alone together for too long, and he was jealous, so he just pushed the door open, and the scene was very embarrassing. Although Napoleon coveted the Queen's beauty, he would not do such a thing during the negotiation. Even if he cheated on the Prussian king, he had to consider the occasion. The two sides are actually negotiating now, and even Napoleon admires Queen Louise very much. In this nearly desperate situation, the Tsar will only give a guarantee to keep Russia's basic base in Brandenburg and East Prussia. Even Danzig, which was captured by the French army a few days ago, is going to establish a free city. Now Queen Louise and Napoleon are talking here, and they are discussing the issue of the handover of some cities on the east bank of the Elbe River. However, the King of Prussia himself, anyone who sees it will feel embarrassed. Your Majesty, you came in at a really bad time. The Queen is very charming. We had a pleasant conversation. I was planning to make greater concessions. Although the words were all literal, and Napoleon was no longer angry, he even planned to make some concessions. However, since the king did not trust the two parties in the talks, he had no choice but to give up. According to the concessions he had made to the Queen, he would give less land to Saxony, and the borders of the Grand Duchy of Poland would be based on what was discussed now. Even so, it was still a very harsh peace treaty for Prussia, but it was much better than cutting it into small pieces and turning the Hohenzollern into an equal inheritance law. Queen Louise could only sigh when she saw her husband like this. She took out a handkerchief to wipe her eyes, obviously to hide her previous tears. She still made Napoleon make concessions through her own means, but her reputation would definitely be troubled. You know, Queen Louise's sister married her second husband with a child, and there are still many people in the European royal family who live indecently. Frederick William III obviously suspected that something had happened between his wife and Napoleon, so he treated his wife coldly. It was raining heavily again. Queen Louise's carriage was open, so she got soaked by the rain. The Russian coat she wore when she went out was soaked through. Your Highness, you should take care of yourself and don't catch a cold. Solovyov, who was on guard duty, was very capable. He quickly brought an umbrella to help the Queen block the rain. Thank you, Baron. It's a pity that you only got these few things back. Things are always unpredictable. You have done a good job. If you treat the defeated country as you would, I'm afraid you will have to pay more thaler. Even if there is a chance to restore Prussia's territory in the future, it will be a heavy burden on the finances. You are a soldier, but you also know how to manage money? After hearing what Queen Louise said, Solovyov also laughed. Your Highness, you are not in St. Petersburg, so you don't know that I come from a merchant family. My grandfather was an accountant for Prince Menshikov. He was conferred the title of Baron during the reign of Empress Catherine I. There is such a story. No wonder you always calculate so carefully when fighting. Although I don't understand military affairs, this is not a good habit. Who said that? Lieutenant Colonel Clausewitz, when he was explaining the art of war to my son, he said that sometimes unexpected changes will seriously interfere with the implementation of the plan. That makes sense, but peace is about to come, and I don't have to go to the battlefield for a while. Then you should get married. I heard that you have a good relationship with Madame Rakemia, who Prince August likes. This queen is good in every way, except that she is too gossipy. Considering that she was born in the year of the monkey, it is inevitable that she is not a gossipy monkey. You even know this. If August hadn't kept a mistress at home, this lady might have fallen for his sweet words. I'm not very good at this. I'm only good at poetry, and the lady often takes health supplements in Petersburg, and they happen to be from my family. You should still go into business, not be a general. You still think like a businessman. But I'm lucky. The lady's complexion has improved a lot after taking donkey skin glue. I'm also going to import Chinese ginseng from Kayakta. If you need it, I can also help you get some. The price is reasonable and I'm honest. Look, this is a relapse of an old illness. You are indeed from a merchant family. Now you are still selling me medicinal herbs." Queen Louise said this and giggled. It's summer now, and the dress the queen wears is obviously more figure flattering. Solovyov only thought that the queen was plump before, but he noticed it now. It was big and very upright, like a full grapefruit. This FW king should cherish such a wife, instead of giving her a cold face. Where did the previous relationship between husband and wife go? You know, Queen Louise risked her reputation to talk to Napoleon alone. Although this was also part of a secret diplomacy, it was after all a man and a woman alone in a room. The queen was so charming, and Solovyov also said that the people in the Bonaparte family, except for Louis who contracted the disease in Egypt and was more like his mother Letizia, and Maria Anna who was greedy for money, all the others were very lustful. But Napoleon was not so anxious, and if such a thing really happened, it would probably make the whole of Prussia more resentful, which was too arrogant. There was such a thing, and it also needed to be done secretly. You know, although Alexander now suspected the people around him who were related to Larissa, he had not yet found him as the perpetrator. Of course, the queen also noticed that Solovyov's sight was obviously diverted. "Michael, are you getting married soon?" "Yes, your highness. I'm engaged to a girl from the Dolgorukov family. The wedding date is set for the fall, and September is more suitable. It will be too cold if it's too late, and that kind of wedding dress will freeze the bride." "Are you talking about my current situation?" Obviously, the queen's physical condition is not good. When Solovyov mentioned this, she also understood. A cold may be very dangerous for you, especially when you get caught in the rain at this time. "Thank you. As a general attendant, you are still very responsible, even if I'm just a guest. This is a task assigned by the emperor, and I will naturally do my best. I just didn't expect it to rain so hard today." When they returned to their residence, Queen Louise went upstairs to change her clothes. She was indeed wet by the rain. Combined with what happened today, she was somewhat pitifully charming. The King of Prussia did not come here today. Although he has some ability in governing domestic affairs, he has been in such a cowardly state recently that even the last bit of dignity of Prussia needs to be maintained by his wife. His actions will also affect the reputation of the queen. It is indeed very embarrassing that things have come to this point. But think about the Hohenzollern that ruled Prussia. If it were not for Russia, it might have perished long ago, instead of being able to maintain the territory of the old kingdom of Prussia today, and making a lot of compensation to survive here. Solovyov also needs to change his coat. He usually stays in the official residence where Alexander stays. The distance between the two sides is very close, which is convenient for summons from all sides. As for Queen Louise, she felt her body trembling soon after she went upstairs and changed her clothes, and then she started to have a high fever again. This scared the maid who had been accompanying her. It was not good for her to fall seriously ill just after the negotiations. However, when Frederick the Great was still alive, he often refused the Prussian doctors. He lived to be over 70 years old, even though he was not in good health. This indirectly proves the strength of the court doctors in Europe. Napoleon also hated bloodletting. He believed that his blood should flow on the battlefield. As for the medical accidents caused by bloodletting in the palace, they were endless, and many people were killed by doctors. It gives people the feeling that studying medicine can't save Europeans. Solovyov actually thought so. He finally relaxed at this moment, changed into a clean set of clothes, and was about to lie down on the camp bed to sleep. He saw a maid of the Queen of Prussia holding an umbrella and coming across the street in panic. Oh, the queen has always had chest tightness and shortness of breath. Could it be that something went wrong at this time? Alexander did have a royal doctor, but thinking about bloodletting, Alexander himself was afraid to treat Queen Louise, which would make the situation worse. Therefore, he asked the doctor to only diagnose and not bleed. It can be said that this northern sphinx is still very good at grasping the key points. Then, Solovyov was drafted again. After all, he knew herbal medicine. Even if there really was a school with 4 colleges in Scotland, he might be able to get a teaching assistant position in herbal medicine. After he changed his clothes, he followed the doctor. Of course, Western medicine also takes the pulse, and the level of the imperial physician in this regard cannot be too low, especially since the queen is particularly demanding on doctors. but this did not prevent the doctor from bleeding her and applying ointment made from insects when she was critically ill. In essence, the doctors of this era are all a group of crouching dragons and phoenixes. Traditional Chinese medicine has abolished its own martial arts and banned the foundations of surgery and some important disciplines, while Western medicine has made scientific progress, but they have not made any progress. If science had promoted the development of medicine, I'm afraid that Queen Louise would have died by now. Doctor, what's the situation? His Majesty the King of Prussia is not here. General, you are also the Emperor's attendant, so it's okay for me to tell you. This is a cold shower, and the emotions are quite excited, so this is the case. Solovyov was also a little confused after hearing this. I just introduced Chinese herbal medicine. Pulse diagnosis is your own system of Western medicine, which has nothing to do with Chinese medicine. How can you diagnose it, as if the old Chinese medicine doctor next door is talking? Then what should I do? I think I still need interparetics. The Emperor wants you to come here, isn't it, because you have some expertise in this area? I understand. It seems that I still have to make a prescription myself. But I'm not a doctor. If necessary, should I ask a doctor to come next time I communicate with the Chinese Emperor? I don't know what the progress of Tang is now, but the traditional Russian medicine still has some basis. Solovyov didn't come alone. An old soldier of the guards followed him, but the old soldier was mumbling. I think this queen is quite pitiful. If she has such a high fever, she should use willow bark as medicine. What did the old soldier say? After all, the doctor was a German. He didn't understand what the old soldier said and had to ask Solovyov to translate. He said to use willow bark. Although it is a folk remedy in the countryside, it makes some sense. But I have some other methods here. I still prepared these herbs for my own use. Doctor, do you think they can be used? He always had herbs on hand, and he was indeed afraid of being treated by quacks. The Tsar's imperial doctors in the palace were the ones who caused Peter Dolgorukov's death at the end of last year because he had a high fever after returning to St. Petersburg. The doctor was helpless at the time, and Queen Louise's current condition was somewhat similar. Solovyov wrote down all the precautions for the herbs to the imperial doctors. The other party saw this guy and wrote down the precautions for the use of the medicine and knew that this attendant general who was proficient in herbs was indeed not given for nothing. Well, that makes sense, but where can I get these herbs? Doctor, wait a minute. Every time I go to war, I will ask my servants to pick some herbs for me. These herbs are common, not so precious. They are in a cowhide briefcase in the bedroom, placed in the most conspicuous place. At this moment, he had sent the doctor away. If he wanted to know the queen's condition, he obviously still needed to ask. Yankeo powder, a medicinal material imported from Kayakta, can only last for 10 days if ginseng is preserved in moss. It is actually difficult to preserve it for a long time. Many medicinal materials Solovyov turned into ryes and folk remedies. Anyway, there are similar plants of the same genus in the local area, as long as they are not too outrageous. He came over to feel Queen Louise's pulse, and then through asking, he also knew the general condition. Since it is a symptom of the initial onset of febrile disease, at least it is right to use medicine. And the queen's body, chest tightness, according to the maid's description, may have been asthma, not heart problems, at least not for the time being. In this case, it should be right to use medicine. Your Highness, the doctor has gone to get some herbs. Just bear with the pain for now. You should feel better after a few days of taking the medicine. Yeah. The queen was a little weak now, and the fever did make her feel uncomfortable. But don't let outsiders know about my condition, Michael, especially. She was so sick, but she was still worried about her useless husband. But it was also strange. When Solovyov spoke next, he also felt that it was strange for these words to come out of his mouth. Yes, Your Highness, you don't want your husband to know. The style of the picture changed instantly. Chapter 481. Some people give out medals, and some people return them. Queen Louise, on her side, was leaning against the head of the bed, trying to stay awake, while talking to Solovyov. She had not suffered any injustice from Napoleon today. On the contrary, the French emperor, who she had despised in the past, and whose family background was humble, was very courteous to her. Even if he was greedy for her body, there would always be a process, and this kind of thing sounded a little too ridiculous. With their current status, generally having a lover would lead to further development. If you think about it, the situation of Solovyov and Larissa was more normal. Even if she was the wife of Louis XIII, she really wanted to find a lover. The Duke of Buckingham's status was too sensitive, and the bishop might also take some necessary measures. Her husband's behavior really broke her heart. At this time, the doctor was not here, and she also wanted to find someone to talk to. Her heart was so cold. Baron, what do you think of my performance today? It can be said that as a queen, no one in this era should do better than you. In such a crisis, you can stand up and be brave. Even men can rarely do it. If you were not born in Mecklenburg-Strelitz, you might really be more suitable. That's probably what I mean. Please don't be surprised. This kind of praise is a burden at this time. The life I had before can't be returned. Thank you, Baron. At least you can come to comfort me. At this point, Queen Louise also felt tired, so she leaned against the head of the bed, with her arm still on Solovyov. After all, she was taking Solovyov's pulse while talking. By the way, the queen's hands and feet are really beautiful. Her figure is plump, but her limbs look very coordinated. No wonder my uncle the emperor's eyes changed when he saw you. But you attendants and generals, even if you are foreigners, don't spread such rumors. Your Highness, your reputation is still very important. Because you are the queen, you can't be like. Men have some advantages in this regard. Among the noble ladies, the spouses of the monarchs are subject to the most restrictions. After saying this, Queen Louise thought about her sister Frederica, who first became a widow and then married a young duke with a child. In the future, she will have to remarry again after her husband dies. Louise is different. Her husband is a king, but he is also relatively cowardly and pays special attention to such rumors. If Solovyov was not good at using herbs, his identity as Napoleon's cheap nephew would be enough to make the Prussian king jealous. Who knows if he is a pimp for his uncle? This means that, even if Solovyov wants to get close to the queen, it is unlikely that he will be a pimp for his uncle. After all, his relatives are on Josephine's side. Can't make things difficult for your aunt. In this regard, his position is similar to Eugene's, and he even complained about French men coming to Poland and being conquered by Polish women, which is completely due to their simple and peaceful character. Of course, after the medicine was brought, Queen Louise would not be cured immediately after taking a dose of it, but she felt much better. Thank you, Baron. I didn't expect your herbs to be more useful at this time. If you need it, Your Highness, you can send people to Moscow and St. Petersburg to purchase. After all, we have a sufficient supply of goods here. The more precious parts of the herbs are picked and imported from places suitable for growing medicinal materials in China and North America. No wonder I heard from August that your queen has been in poor health, but after giving birth, her complexion has improved a lot. Fortunately, Solovyov was paying attention to the queen's pulse at this moment, instead of sending her a look to expose the target. Otherwise, with the queen's gossip level, as long as she could guess, it would be hard to say whether the rumor would spread later. You know, although Larissa had a lover, he had always kept it secret, and Alexander pretended not to know, and even pointed in the wrong direction during the investigation. No matter how you think about it, you can't imagine that such a loyal Solovyov can do such an unspeakable thing. Even if Alexander suspected that he had an affair with Maria, or even his most doting sister Ekaterina, he would not think of his wife. Ah, that's right, because Her Highness Elizabeth Alexeyevna is indeed recuperating, but these healthcare medicines are the most useful. As for Prince August, he has always been the protagonist of some European scandals, and there may be other rumors in the future that can be related to him. I have to thank him. Madame Rakemia is in St. Petersburg, and she can actually provide a lot of information about Paris. Even if it is expired, it can be used to analyze the political ecology of Paris. Who made her have General Moreau and Napoleon's brother Lucien around her, and she can find out a lot of things in the banker circle. I want to visit St. Petersburg after a while. After all, Elena and I have a very deep friendship. The citizens of Berlin love her as much as they love me. Are you really going to St. Petersburg? What's wrong with that? I think my husband. He might. At this point, Queen Louise started crying again. She was heartbroken this time. Although Alexander's new royal physician may have learned too much about bloodletting when he was young, his basic skills are still good enough. The reason why Queen Louise fell ill was not just because of being caught in the rain. She needed to be sad enough to be like this. Don't think like that. Think more about the children, such as Princess Charlotte. At this point, Queen Louise also knew that Solovyov was the teacher of Grand Duke Nicholas and still had a say in the court. At this time, she said this, which should have revealed something before. You are thinking about your students, right? Yes, although Nicholas is still young, I think if you go to Petersburg, you will probably know why I said that. When Her Highness Maria chatted with me once, she also praised the princess for being smart and sensible. The relationship between Maria and Solovyov has always been delicate. If they are ambiguous, the latter can't avoid this young lady. If they are just ordinary friends, it's too close. After all, among the young officers he knows in the palace, there are relatively few who can do things like him. Moreover, some special talents can impress Maria in music and poetry, which is a special bonus. For other officers of the guards, except for Davidov who is an outstanding poet, the rest of them are more or less lame when it comes to publishing poems. That is to say, Pushkin is still a child in the Imperial Village Preparatory School, otherwise he might be more popular. If that's the case, I hope to go to St. Petersburg and meet your students. His Highness Nicholas is just young, otherwise the girls in St. Petersburg would be crazy about him. Compared with the fluctuating academic performance caused by not studying hard and always thinking about training, Nicholas's handsome appearance is more durable. He is no longer the bald image of middle-aged and elderly people. Having said this, the queen herself was quite satisfied. She asked Solovyov again, that is, Alexander's previous statement was very important. Agree to contact Prussia and may consider choosing Princess Charlotte when considering marriage in the future, but Nicholas is still young, and it will take a few years to put this issue on the table. Finding a wife for an 11-year-old child, except that Louis XV was anxious to get married, because the Bourbon family almost broke the bloodline, is actually not too urgent. That's how it was. Solovyov can finally finish today's task and go back to sleep. In the next few days, after the peace treaty was signed, Prussia was already miserable enough, and King FW had to force himself to attend a series of receptions. Queen Louise's illness was very timely. Fortunately, the king needed to experience the pressure that the queen felt at the time. What kind of intensity is this? Alexander also mediated, and at least preserved the most basic base for Prussia, but this also returned to the time before Frederick invaded Silesia overnight, which can be said to be bad enough. But peace is always better than war. At this time, Alexander also proposed that he and Napoleon award various medals to each other's important personnel. Napoleon also agreed to this link. The main medal awarded by France to Russia was the Legion of Honor. Alexander naturally won the highest level of medals, and the generals below, and even a guard soldier who performed bravely in battle, also won this award. And the medals awarded by Russia to France, from the Order of St. Andrew the Apostle to the Order of Alexander Nevsky, etc., still exist. The Prussian king will also issue the highest level of medals to the monarchs of both sides, and the generals below will naturally be issued. Solovyov has nothing to do here today, just following behind Alexander, and he also received a third-class commander-level medal of the Legion of Honor. Although he is just a young general, his performance in the war is indeed very eye-catching, and it is difficult not to attract the attention of the French. What's more, he is actually a relative of the emperor. Even Napoleon promised that, after returning to Paris, he would grant Baron Sergei the corresponding title and honor. A Russian nobleman was awarded the title of Count of the French Empire because of his capable wife and son. Although it sounds abstract, it is not surprising considering that abstractionism is a joint work of France and Russia. As for the medals issued by Prussia, Solovyov had previously won a Red Eagle medal, and this time he could only be awarded the Blue medal. Prussia does not even have a medal for soldiers now, and low-ranking officers often cannot get it. The highest reward may still be death in action. It is still funny to think that German officers will have a lawsuit over a medal in the future. Moreover, this medal has to be hung around the neck, and Frederick William III will also decorate it with an oak leaf. Considering that he often wears a monocle and holds a small whip in the staff, it is true that the German stick leaders are all in Russia. But in public, it is generally not like this. After being promoted to lieutenant general, this issue will be considered. The problem now is that Solovyov's merits are almost enough for the standard of lieutenant general, but he was promoted to major general at the beginning of this year. Even if Paul is still there, the impact of the fast promotion channel must be considered. At that time, some generals who were promoted from middle and lower level officers within a few years had very ordinary prospects. In the army, seniority is a basis for promotion. If your background is not good, you will not succeed. At this time, it should be peaceful. The monarchs of France and Russia temporarily ended the hostility on the European continent. However, there are always people who will perform performance art at this time. Even when they just arrived at Jelgava, Alexander was already angry. "Gustav, how dare he do this? Your Majesty, we signed a peace treaty with the French Emperor in Tilsit and became an ally." Gustav IV expressed strong dissatisfaction with this and returned the Order of St. Andrew the Apostle that was previously awarded to him. When saying this, Badberg was still very careful about Alexander's emotions. He rarely showed it like this and usually let people around him guess his attitude. But Gustav IV was his brother-in-law after all, and the two families were cousins. It should be close. Even if the countries were hostile, the exchanges between monarchs should still proceed normally. However, when Gustav III, the father of Gustav IV, was alive, he deliberately made enemies with Russia and even triggered a Russo-Swedish war. Alexander was still a child at that time and was deeply impressed by this incident. Gustav IV was a discotheque player. He broke off his marriage and almost made his sister Alexandra unable to get married. Later, he provoked the nerves of Russia on bilateral issues several times. Now that he heard about the peace talks between France and Russia, he turned on the crazy mode and directly returned the medals awarded by Russia to protest. It can be said to be a serious diplomatic insult. But what Alexander is more concerned about now is the attitude of the British. If Russia joins the continental blockade, the impact on Britain may be just the loss of a huge market. Britain, a supplier of raw materials, has many places to choose from. If you have control of the sea, you can do whatever you want. But the British have not jumped out yet, and Sweden, which is closer, has become the first bird to come out, which really makes him very dissatisfied. If necessary, Alexander even wants to send troops to directly teach Gustav IV a lesson. Solovyov listened from the side and knew that this was a good opportunity to make military achievements. After all, he had been to Sweden when he was on a staff trip. He had escorted Alexander's father-in-law all the way back to the European continent, so he had some understanding of the situation in Sweden. Moreover, fighting the Swedes was more economical than brushing Turkish experience packs. Chapter 482. Before the next stop, it's time to make some preparations. The return of the medal by the King of Sweden was also a serious diplomatic insult, so Alexander still had some grudges in his heart. But the summoning of Badberg was also due to the impact, so no discussion was launched. Moreover, Sweden's location was also stuck on the main route for Russia's foreign trade navigation. With the blockade of the British Royal Navy, Russia would be locked in the Baltic Sea in the north. Therefore, in Tilsit, Napoleon and Alexander agreed to form an alliance. The official commercial mutual praise was a set of routines, and the continental blockade had to be implemented. In addition, there was a division of spheres of influence. Sweden is located in northern Europe, and the French army is unlikely to send troops to this direction. Their attention is mainly on Central Europe and the Strait. Spain has not had any serious problems at this time. The situation seems to be very favorable to Napoleon. On the issue of Sweden, Napoleon even hinted that Alexander could dispose of it at will. According to his usual characteristics, he would always find a place to sit down and negotiate with the Swedes first. If the negotiations fail, the garrison in Viborg will be mobilized to argue with Sweden. If Gustav IV was a discerning man, he should not have provoked Alexander's sensitive nerves like this and returned the medal. This medal of the Order of St. Andrew the Apostle will be awarded to a person with military merit in the future as the highest reward. Solovyov, you have made great contributions in Poland this time. Are you interested in getting it? Your Majesty, according to convention, this medal is awarded to military officers with the rank of lieutenant general or above, senior nobles above the third-class civil servant, and foreign monarchs. Although my current rank has rules left over from the time of Peter the Great, this fast promotion channel has never been realized. Yes, being promoted too quickly will arouse jealousy. This is in Russia, but it may not be like this in France, right? But the changes over there are too rapid, and from a revolutionary perspective, the ones who benefit the most are not the peasants, but the bankers in Paris. This is the worst case scenario. You still know the French very well, and the French emperor has recognized you as his nephew. What are you going to do next? Your Majesty, there are many things to do. Now I still owe the newspaper manuscripts and the steam locomotive for the Imperial Village Railway. I think I should take a leave to get married in Moscow. Don't worry. Katyr is Lisa's maid and the youngest among the queen's maids. You are still lucky. If you were not so promising and taught Nicholas, it would not be your turn to marry the granddaughter of Prince Krimsky. Yes, Your Majesty. But when Solovyov saw Alexander like this, he didn't know what he was up to today. Well, you can prepare for your wedding. I remember that a manor is being built on the land granted to you. I wonder how it's going now. Your Majesty, according to the report of the engineer Bilzoni I hired, it should be completed in the autumn, but the style is Rococo, like the small villa that Madame Pompadour once built. As for the surrounding swamps and woodlands, they should also be properly developed to become a nice manor. You still have some leisure time, but why decorate it in this style? Your Majesty, if you want to marry a wife, you must have someone she likes, and she's a little girl who hasn't grown up yet. This can be considered a girly style. I asked my stepsister Adela to give her the design. Is that the little maid you brought back from Paris? Yes, Your Majesty. Since she is your adopted sister, she should also have the status of a noble lady. Otherwise, when she gets married in the future, I'm afraid it won't even be considered a marriage between a noble and a commoner. Then I'd like to thank Your Majesty on behalf of Adela. Although Alexander had all kinds of problems, his attitude towards his subordinates was good. He was just too ambitious and had some unrealistic ideas like his father, but he also returned to the original form of the current facts. Now, he didn't have those wild ideas, and he was more normal. This is what you deserve, because of your outstanding service. Go home. Yes, Your Majesty. Solovyov was finally able to temporarily leave his duty, and he could temporarily bid farewell to this kind of court life in Petersburg. At the end of this summer, Queen Louise came to Petersburg with her daughters. She had obviously recovered from the fever, and coming here was also a routine visit. Considering that she has always lived a simple life, and was invited by Alina and Maria, there was no expense. Moreover, the queen's purpose was relatively clear. Solovyov's plan seemed to be tacitly approved by Alexander, and Charlotte could come to the Winter Palace to meet Nicholas. According to the arrangement of the school system, it is still summer vacation. Nicholas also has his own troubles. During the vacation, he also has some freedom, so he came to visit Solovyov's new home near the Imperial Village. Your Highness Nicholas, you are the first visitor to visit after the construction of this place. Boss, don't be so polite, you are still my teacher. This kid is very straightforward, and Solovyov also found that this kid has grown up very fast, and now he is almost as tall as himself. A boy who is tall and strong and looks so delicate is indeed a bit inconsistent, and even a bit of an illusion that he is already an adult. If he hadn't even reached the voice change period and still had a baby voice, it would be hard to imagine. If you are willing to stay here for a while, I'm also very welcome, but I don't know if the Queen Mother will allow it. The Queen Mother thinks that I'm an adult, so I can bring a few followers to visit friends. You are my teacher and my friend, so of course I'm willing to come to you. Do you have any other purpose? Not yet, but the Queen of Prussia came with her daughters, and Sister Maria took me to meet them. Hearing this, Solovyov had a clue in his mind. It seemed that the Queen herself had taken action. How is Charlotte? Are you talking about the Prussian princess? Her voice is a little hoarse, and she looks like she has just recovered from a serious illness, but she is also very cute, like a doll. Although Nicholas was precocious, he did not expect what his brother, sister, mother, and teacher were thinking, but from his tone, it seems that he did not dislike Charlotte. This is a good start. Solovyov did not intend to ask too much about this issue. If the queen sends her daughters to the palace for a visit in the future, this will be the key point. Nicholas simply thought it was more fresh, and he came to visit the teacher's home. It can be said that it was a home visit in the opposite direction. Doll Princess Charlotte, Mariah likes her very much and often invites her to play. My elder sister got married when I was very young. The impression I have of my elder sisters is mostly, what is it? Although Nicholas wanted to use some not so good words to describe his fourth sister, he still held back. You know, at home, besides their mother, they also have their brother and sister-in-law and a sister. The image of his sister-in-law is irreplaceable to him, but Ekaterina always has a bit of a deadly female devil feeling. But in front of the person she likes, she will become a little bird. I have to say, this changes really fast. I think it's better not to mention it. That's it. Your place looks really beautiful. If the sisters see it, they will probably like it. When they went to Lopushin's house before, they praised the decoration of the hostess's reception room. I must have taken you there too. Yes, but there is no study room this big in that house. There are a lot of materials I collected here, which are still needed for translation and writing. Are there any military science books? Carla, didn't I say that your grades? Huh. Yes, the Queen Mother was very dissatisfied with the final exam this semester. If you are placed in the school in the Imperial Village, if you have a reference object, this is not good. Obviously, Solovyov did not let Nikolai touch his bookshelf. This is indeed Nikolai's favorite military science. This kid, even if he tried to correct it himself, he didn't change it all. Mikhail likes to study mathematics very much. After all, his military branch is artillery. Nikolai naturally shrank back after hearing this. But coming to my place is like being at home. My chef cooks delicious dishes. What do you want to eat? In the end, it comes back to the question of food. Solovyov is also a headache for Nicholas' education. After all, he is the second heir, and he cannot neglect this aspect. As for military books, he will definitely not be allowed to read too many, because he has a correction agreement with the Queen Mother. Especially since his home is the place Nicholas cares about the most. He has collected a lot of them over the years, including military theories co-authored with Grand Duke Carol, and some memoranda left by Suvorov. It can be said that everything Nicholas wants most is here, but it is also troublesome for a master to control his heart. This soup tastes good, boss. Life in the barracks is quite different from life at home. I can't go against my stomach. Since I'm at home, I have to eat good food. These fish are from Lake Ladoga, very fresh, and the scenery is so beautiful. It's close to Lichtenberg, but it's not so eye-catching, because the swamps have not been developed. After a few years of transformation, this place should become a paradise. Boss, what do you think? Transform part of the land into farmland, plant some fruit trees on the edge, raise some livestock, and have a school for serfs, as well as a small fishing port on the edge of Lake Ladoga. After listening to this, Nicholas was not very interested, but was more concerned about the teacher's married life. In this manner, it would cost a lot to build a large-scale project. Is that all? What else should there be? You won't tell me. Is it a parade ground? That's it. You are an outstanding general. Why don't you build one here? Forget it. This is at home, not in the barracks. Nikolai, your idea can only be rejected by me. But if you want to hunt, you can arrange a hunting ground and go hunting in the woods when it's suitable. We can go hunting deer. When the late emperor took us to the royal hunting ground to hunt, it was the deer that Count Palin and I brought back and made barbecue. You were still young at that time, so you probably don't remember it, right? Nikolai tilted his head and thought about it. He really didn't have any memory. The impression his father gave him was probably a little old man in a black uniform. It was even less likely that he would remember that the guards officers went hunting and brought back a deer. But I'm interested in going hunting with you. After Katyr and I get married, the hunting ground will be ready next year. Then I can take you over to stay for a few days, but don't delay your homework. Speaking of homework, Nikolai shuddered involuntarily. The boss, or Miss Cap, was very kind to him. He was never very strict in class. Other teachers were strict. But the most terrible thing about him was that he would give a lot of homework. Even if he assigned summer homework, it was not as terrible as those homework, especially math. Boss, but homework still needs to be done, unless I'm no longer your teacher. Her Majesty the Queen Mother has never meant to relieve this position. Nicholas could only shake his head after hearing this, but living here, the nagging of other teachers would not reach his ears. I mean, math homework. Mikhail is younger than me, and he did the test questions I had before, but I always compared to Mikhail. You are the older brother and older, so naturally the test questions are also difficult. But when Nicholas mentioned math, Solovyov thought of someone. Because the Principality of Brunswick was successively destroyed, the Black Duke also went to Britain as the heir, and sent his wife to Sweden first, and then to St. Petersburg, and sent his son to the child's aunt, and most of the people in the court had to be dismissed. In addition, the Kingdom of Westphalia was established. Jerome Bonaparte came to Kassel to be the king. After he went there, he not only established a hunting ground, hunted there from time to time, but also raised large cats in the zoo. But in terms of academics, he was not like Napoleon. He was the only one in the family who was a complete playboy. He became the king on the merits of his brothers, and married a princess of a German state as his daughter-in-law. Therefore, he issued an order to the university professors in Westphalia, that is, all the university professors on duty had to pay a sum of money to come to work. This matter is easy for others, at least they have some savings, or their sponsors still have territories. For Gauss, it was not a good thing. If he had to pay to work, he did not have much savings. Although his friends raised funds for him, he did have some financial difficulties. At this time, it can be said that poaching is more appropriate. Petersburg had already invited him before, and even the Imperial University of Moscow had offered him a job offer as the head of the Department of Mathematics and a double-paid professor. This uncle is really awesome. He started working before the king even had time to sit down. Chapter 483, at Pierre's house in Moscow. Nikolai stayed at Solovyov's house for 2 days, but left reluctantly. Although there was a master to look after him, there was no one else to look after him, and he was even quite free. No matter whether the child was from a royal family, aristocratic family or a commoner family, he still preferred a life without restraint. But Solovyov would not continue to live here. He was going to Moscow this time. On the one hand, he had to prepare for his wedding, which would be held at the old house of the Dolgorukov family on Sparrow Hills bought by Prince Yusupov. On the other hand, his old friend Pierre invited him to Moscow. It was still early, so he could just treat it as a visit to a friend's house. As for the matter of marrying a wife, since he had been serving in the army, it was all handled by his family. Now that he was back from the front, he could take time to do his own things, and he could also go to Moscow to handle Gauss's matter. Before leaving, as usual, he still had to submit a memorial. That's right, in order to be a little different from other people's memorials, Solovyov actually made a folding screen for Alexander, and his memorials were often long and inconvenient if they were not folded. But just to recommend Gauss, he spent so much time and effort, and his performance was indeed abstract enough. You know, although Gauss's mathematical level was higher than some people's belts, he didn't like teaching. Although he was very hard-working when doing research, there was another problem. He was often unwilling to go to the defense when his papers were published. Solovyov knew about this because the old Duke of Brunswick told him that Gauss's thesis was exempted from defense and passed directly in the graduation thesis of a local university. But he was devoted to theoretical research at home and didn't even come to the scene. It is definitely not possible for him to teach in Göttingen now. After all, Jerome has set up a paid job. Since the territory of Hanover has also been annexed, he has to consider the occasion if he wants a teaching position. After mentioning Gauss's talent, Solovyov set off for Moscow. Starting from Lake Ladoga, we must first come to Gatchina. It can be seen that a steam locomotive that was built by primitive methods is being debugged, but it is only a test run. This project is not under his jurisdiction, and it is just to facilitate transportation in the Imperial Village. It does not involve any transportation franchise, and it is even just an attempt. After all, there is a major problem, that is, the steamship provides power blessing. After all, it is the first project to be launched, which is easy to say. To build a railway, this needs to be verified. According to the National Project Acceptance, it will take several years. You can't eat hot tofu in a hurry, especially this project, which is better to be completed before the Empress Dowager's 50th birthday. It sounds like the Qing dynasty and that Tsarist Russia are half-brothers. Solovyov planned this railway, Paul approved it, Count Vorontsov recruited people in the UK, and Alexander is now preparing it for his mother's birthday. Well, after all, technology has improved, which is a good thing. Then, he set out on the road to Moscow. On his way to Moscow, if he had to go somewhere, he would first walk to Tverskaya Street. Although he appeared from the garrison in Moscow, Solovyov spent most of his time in St. Petersburg, and he was not so familiar with this place. If his relatives were not all around Moscow, he would not have come back once before, and he also had the task of setting up a military supply factory in Rouen. One of Pierre's mansions is on Arbut Street, but Pierre usually does not live here. He and his wife Helen are separated, and his wife lives here. Solovyov would not touch this kind of bad luck. If Helen saw him and caused any trouble again, it would be bad. There was a little goblin in St. Petersburg before, but she was not as restless as her and would create disputes all day long. In addition, Solovyov has always had a bad relationship with the children of the Kurokin family, so it is unlikely that he will appear here on Arbut Street. At this time, he also arrived at another mansion where Pierre lived. It must be said that Pierre's house is really big. In these mansions in Moscow, princes and nobles had settled here during the period of the Principality of Moscow. Many mansions had already been laid out since the time of Ivan the Terrible. Even though it was burned by the Poles and two pseudo-Dmitri appeared in succession, the general framework of the core urban area of Moscow remained unchanged. As for Smolensk Street, Pierre's mansion is not far from Marshal Kamensky's house. The old marshal recently came to Moscow from Oryol. In summer, he does not live in the countryside, but in winter, he has to go to the countryside. Pierre usually stays here, and if the Freemasonry has any activities, they will be held in his house. Among such a group of people, he actually does not feel any happiness. When Solovyov came, he was very happy. Mishap, thank you for coming to my house at this time. Pierre, I'm sorry to bother you. After all, you can't live in your fiancé's house at this time, nor can you live in my cousin's house. It doesn't matter. You can stay here before you go to Sparrow Hill to propose marriage. Although Pierre said this in a very friendly and ordinary tone, the rooms in his house are also one of the best on this street. Moscow. Speaking of Moscow, there are also 7 hills here, just like Rome and Constantinople. Why did you suddenly think of this? Pierre, I'm just curious why Rome moved, and it was so far-fetched. You'd better not say such things. You should know that there are always some people here who don't have good intentions. Thank you, Pierre. You always consider others like this. If they tell on me, they should also consider that I just came back from the front, and it's not a special thing. In addition, how is Andrei recently? He has been in Smolensk recently, but if you are getting married, the couple will also return to Moscow. That's not bad. As for the friends in Moscow, who else will come? I will definitely help you with this matter. Thank you in advance, but now that we have no official business, we can go to Moscow for a tour together. When you were in Moscow, you were always in the barracks, except when you came out to do things for my father. Since you mentioned the 7 hills, we can take a car out to take a look together. So, Pierre brought his trusted coachman with him to go on a tour with Solovyov. Among the 7 hills, there is Sparrow Hills, which is far from the Kremlin and the last point on their journey. The first place to go is Borovitsky Hill, where Yuri Dolgoruki established a settlement in the 12th century. It is also the earliest record of Moscow in the chronicles. If we go back to earlier times, this area was once a place where the Scythians roamed, and people had already settled in Borovitsky Hill in the Bronze Age. In 1147, Moscow was just an inconspicuous village on the border of the Grand Duchy of Rostov-Suzdal, but now it has become such a huge city, and it is really unexpected that it is known as the Third Rome. But this is the situation in Moscow now. Mishap, we are going to visit the 7 hills and take a look at Moscow's past. Maybe there will be a future. Pierre, how many serfs do you have now? In total, there are 48,000 in various manners. My goodness, the number of serfs owned by one person is already 1.3 of the country's population. If the productivity of the feudal serfdom manor had not been so backward, he would be the largest landlord in Russia, and Count Bezukhov's family would have the largest property in Moscow. I know you always have the idea of change, but the actions we take now can only make changes in our own manner. My family does not have so many serfs, only a few hundred people. You can. We talked about some things in Riga. What do you plan to do? If you focus on business, you can start to get the funds moving. What you said to me makes sense to me. As long as the money is flowing, we can do a lot of things, and we will have the ability to change some things. But don't get involved in too many political issues. Among us, you are the only one who is a real and pure person. You can't correct what Andrei has advised you about. But if you emphasize it repeatedly, it will always help you to take the right path. Am I right? Well, that's probably it. A lot of things did happen in the past. Andrei should have told you that he is at home now and can help you with some things. I have been in the army and cannot get away. I have become a general. I returned to Moscow just to get married. But if you need me to do something, just tell me when I can help you. The carriage was heading towards the Sparrow Hills again. Pierre heard what Solovyov said, and he would not let his friend worry too much about him. He just said, "It's just that. Alas, what I fear most is being idle. If you need me, we can always take care of each other, but don't get involved in politics. Don't get involved in politics. Important things always need to be said more." When they arrived at the Sparrow Hills, Pierre and Solovyov saw a birch forest and an abandoned wooden palace, which looked very dilapidated. Even 50 years ago, the Vorobyovsky Palace was a single-story wooden palace with 124 rooms. It was the palace of Ivan the Terrible, but now it has been abandoned, and even partially demolished, turning into a ruin in the birch forest. It really is 7 mountains, but if you are outside Moscow, you can probably find some places with 7 mountains. The distance between the hills in Moscow is a little far. Over there is the palace that Prince Yusupov recently bought. I will get married there. The location of this place is indeed good. It is a good place to escape the summer heat, but now the season is about to pass. It doesn't matter if it passes. We may have another chance to escape the summer heat here next year. With how busy you are, I can't imagine that maybe you have something to do again. Even though I have been in Moscow, I know that your French relatives are not small. It seems that this kind of news spreads the fastest, but I only made a small contribution in Tilsit, and I met Napoleon again. It was indeed an interesting experience to meet him as an envoy and recognize him as a relative. You have always believed that peace can be lasting, even forever, but there are always people who cannot avoid their ambitions, so they will fight against each other. I believe that if people are wholeheartedly committed to a good cause, wars can be avoided. If that happens, soldiers will probably be out of work. Pierre, do you want to go and take a look at this abandoned palace? Solovyov said so, and Pierre agreed to accompany him. The two of them entered the birch forest. This place has been here since before Ivan the Terrible, right? And there's an imperial university nearby. In my letter to the emperor, I mentioned that I wanted to invite some European scholars. Now I have the strange experience of paying to work. We can invite them to Moscow and St. Petersburg. What do you think? That's certainly a good thing. I've even thought about running a school. Run a school? It's not impossible to build a private university with your financial resources, but if you really want to run a school, you have to start with basic education and target more at civilians. I do have this idea. You know, when I was in St. Petersburg, I paid attention to private schools run by the French, and I myself was educated in Paris. But the investment is huge, and the results are slow. We can first establish a normal school similar to the one in St. Petersburg, to train a group of qualified teachers. The ones on the podium can't always be the same old things that priests say, telling students that the history of the earth is 4,000 years. If someone gets exposed to science, they may still have doubts. There is some truth in this. First of all, people should be literate. For example, in my estates around Moscow, if the farmers can read, they can do a lot of things. Then we need to let them know agricultural knowledge, not just wield hoes to work. It seems that you still have some ideas about what I told you in Riga, Pierre. Building schools is also my responsibility. I want to apply to be transferred from a palace eunuch to a civil servant and set up a school here in Moscow. With your rank, I'm afraid you will have to start directly as a 5th class civil servant. If you are a local inspector, you should be a 4th class civil servant or even a 3rd class civil servant. And you have to supervise the construction of hundreds of schools in the jurisdiction. That would be a glorious cause, and I'm willing to do it. Chapter 484, Encounter at Sparrow Hill. It seems that Peer is willing to engage in education, although the investment cost is indeed relatively high. They continue to walk in the ruins of Ivan the Terrible's palace to see the situation here. In fact, if it is cleaned up, a square or park can be built. You know my situation, but religious beliefs do not allow you to divorce casually, even if the whole of Moscow knows it. I have nothing to say about the Kurakin family. Peer, you can get out of this situation when the time is right. Prince Vasily's words sound nice, but he will only bring sin and disaster, and there is no redemption. If it were Prince Yusupov, he would be an old neighbor of my family, and the couple would still be jointly fulfilling their obligations to raise their children, instead of just demanding and possessing them. Come to think of it, I have to thank you, mishap. You don't even know it, right? Is there anything else I don't know? Remember the Russian Empire Trust? I know this. It's part of the financial reform. It was one of the anonymous petitions I wrote when His Majesty Paul was still alive. This petition has never been responded to, but the trust industry was still approved. In addition, there is a property insurance company. I remember that the old count was once one of the directors. Yes, it was because of this trust that most of the property was preserved. You are really a smart man to think of such a solution, although a lot of management fees and taxes were paid at the time. It's better to keep these wealth in your hands and do some practical things than to let others squander it, right? After saying that, Solovyov also laughed. It is very likely that Helen did not get a large sum of money, but only occupied the mansion on Albert Street. This is a lot of fun. If she abused abortion pills and died, the property would still return to Peer. This greedy woman, even if the 2 big grapefruits on her chest are so tempting, is a scorpion and a venomous snake who will specially create some trouble. However, Lisa is still alive, and Andrei will not consider finding another wife. For Natasha, it may be even more dangerous. She is more likely to be abducted without an engagement, and it is even very dangerous. This kind of thing often happens among Russian nobles. It is a daily routine to abduct other people's wives and unmarried girls. The mother of the new daughter-in-law of the Goncharov family was abducted by her father in this way. That is, her father's real wife is more tolerant, and this illegitimate daughter is raised by him. What if it is a bastard like Anatoly? Compared with Dolokhov, this guy's pure evil. Dolokhov knows how to stick his neck out for his friends, and even has to be steady and explain things clearly before doing bad things. At home, Dolokhov is also a filial son, and he also has a desire to get married and start a career. He is still an ambitious bastard. But Solovyov didn't have time to think about these. He was not very familiar with the Rostov family. He only met them once, when he returned to his hometown in Ryazan, but it was also at the old count's place. But Peer is different. He often stays with the Rostov family, and is always a guest there. They walk here, just chatting and taking a walk. Compared with the Sparrow Hills and Borovitsky Hills, other hills are not so important. It's just that, when you walk here, it's inevitable that you will run into a group of chattering girls. The area around the Sparrow Hills is very suitable for outings. Speaking of Peer, he also met Natasha when he was at the Rostov's house. Maybe the two of them are more suitable. Now, I saw her in the birch forest of Sparrow Hills. And what was not so coincidental was that these girls were all unmarried girls, including Solovyov's fiancée, Katya. Yulia sometimes complained to her brother that she could not play with some friends by sending her to the girls' school, but she would thank him for making more friends in the girls' school at the Smolny Palace. This sister was so emotional, and other girls might be like this too. After Prince Yusupov bought the Dolgorukov family's estate on Sparrow Hill, he invited the Dolgorukov family to live there permanently because his girls got along well with Katya, and the girls often kept each other company when they were in Moscow. As for their outing here, Peer and Solovyov certainly didn't know. If Natasha hadn't been singing there, they certainly wouldn't have noticed. It was Pierre who noticed it first. Listen, mishap. It sounds like Natasha from the Rostov family is singing. The youngest daughter of Count Rostov. That's right. We can go over there. I mean, let's go over there and take a look. The girls are here, and we are here too. It might not be polite if we don't go over to see them. Okay, we can go over there. Turning from the birch forest to the abandoned garden of the palace, we can see the girls sitting on the flower bed to rest. Not only Natasha is here, but also the daughter of the princess and her ex-husband is here, as well as little Kataya and her sister Sonya, and Sonya from the Rostov family. Solovyov still sympathizes with the last girl. A girl who can't get married because of no dowry may be more valuable spiritually. See, it's the square Pierre and the flower general. My lady, why is Pierre square, and I'm the flower general? Natasha, she is not very beautiful, but she looks lively and young, which is indeed a good thing. But she is also good at describing others. The girl's eyes rolled around, and she thought about what to say, and finally answered Solovyov. Think about Pierre's appearance. His shoulders are so broad, and he looks like a square from behind. As for you, we all know that you are so handsome. That is, Natasha, if you keep talking, I won't bring you to the tea party tomorrow. Little Kataya said this, obviously gossiping about something, when the girls got together. It's okay, there are always some secrets between girls that they don't want us to know. What are you doing here? We are here for an outing, singing, writing some poems, and Kataya will go back and paint each of us. Brother Miss Cap, you and Kataya are going to get married, and she will call you dear in the future, and we will still treat you as a reliable big brother. The girl from the Potemkin family is very talkative and so cute. If someone who is more of a homebody heard this sentence, and her sweet and greasy voice, I'm afraid he would fall directly. Of course, she was also very good at finding her true love. She secretly married a young nobleman from Switzerland, and received the blessings of her mother, stepfather, aunt, and cousins. However, her face was really big, which was a typical feature of the Potemkin family. However, her father was Prince Potemkin's cousin. Solovyov couldn't understand why some people said that she looked like Aunt Josephine. He couldn't delve into this question. After all, he heard it from Madame Rukania. How are your affairs, Kataya from the Potemkin family? There was no way. The names of these girls were always so unremarkable. There were too many people with the same name. During the Empress's period, there were more girls named Ekaterina, which was also closely related to the atmosphere in the court. Now there are many girls in the court, named Maria and Elizabeth. The youngest daughter of Prince Yusupov and his wife was named Maria, and many young mothers in the palace named their children Elizabeth. As for me, I have to wait for my mother's consent before the final result can be achieved. Although Alexander Rybopia had caused trouble before, he was also a very promising diplomat and financial expert. He did a great job in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The princess also agreed. Then I want to wish you all the best in advance. Although the princess is easy to talk to, there are always some obstacles in this marriage. As for my situation, you all know that Kataya and I are from the Krimsky family, to be exact. Miss Kat, please don't say it in front of the sisters. Little Kataya was still a little embarrassed. She knew that she was about to get married, but she was not willing to accept this fact. The happy life of her girlhood was about to end, and she even felt a little nostalgic. Well, I can't say it, but the girls can talk about it at will. Yes, Kataya, you are really, why can't the person involved talk about it? Natasha said this again. She was still too lively, and because she was not very familiar with him, she dared to say it. Natasha, but what kind of person are you going to marry? Little Kataya asked back, and Natasha didn't say anything. Although they were close in age, Natasha obviously didn't have that much idea about being a bride. She just felt very good when she saw her brother and cousin kissing, and then she kissed Boris. The problem with the Rostovs was probably here. They always did whatever they thought of. Natasha didn't answer, but Sonya interrupted and changed the subject. Count Pierre, what are you doing here? Miss Ha came from Petersburg, and I invited him to my house on Smolensk Street. That's it. We mentioned that Moscow also has the 7 hills, just like Rome and Constantinople. So we came to Sparrow Hills, and visited this abandoned palace. Peer was like this, speaking slowly and clearly. With this honest and innocent expression and his past experiences, everyone sympathized with him. It's really something that the flower general who likes to write poetry can do. Count Peer, you are really willing to accompany him on a tour. Then, the topic was picked up by the Potemkin girl again. Since you are my guest, you should treat her well. We always talk about things at this time, just like when I was with Andrei in the past. Yes, girls, we do this often, discussing something while walking. But I'm often in the army. The most pleasant time to talk with Peer was in Paris. At that time, we rented the same apartment and had a lot of topics to talk about. When we were in the apartment, there was also Adela. How is she recently? My stepmother is going to have a baby recently, so she went back to her home on the Moika River to help. What if she is on the way back to Moscow? Then there is nothing we can do. Your family is really prosperous now. Solovyov has been away for a long time. Sometimes he is not so familiar with his family when he returns home. After all, in a year or two, his father and stepmother will give him a younger brother or sister. In this case, he needs to work harder. Even. It's not a secret, Catherine. You know that Baron Mikhail's aunt is the Queen of France. Sona spoke more formally. She was not so close to Natasha and Solovyov. Ah, no wonder you always look for relatives when you go abroad to fight. This is the point. Solovyov can't say anything now. The girls are chattering there, and little Katya feels a little embarrassed after listening. But these are good sisters in Moscow, and she can only be a listener. Solovyov noticed this situation, and leaned to the edge of the flower bed. Katya, let's go for a walk, okay? When he stretched out his hand, little Katya also came down from the flower bed, and the two of them put their hands together. That's it. The girls all covered their faces with small fans and giggled. Let's go. Katya, let's go for a walk alone. The two of them didn't have much emotional foundation, although among the nobles who married, they were the kind who were more familiar with each other before marriage. But in little Katya's mind, Solovyov was still a brave soldier and a reliable elder brother, and the identity of his fiancé made her a little embarrassed. In fact, their identities were similar to the relationship between Andrei and Natasha. It's just that Solovyov's status is lower, and it's Prince Vasily who is very optimistic about the future of this young man. He even became the commander-in-chief of the Selenge regiment. It was always Prince Vasily who pushed behind the scenes. Little Katya was still not used to this identity, because she felt awkward. Therefore, Solovyov wanted to take her out for a walk, and this place was so open that everyone could see clearly what they were going to do. I think we can get to know each other well now, Katya. After all, this is for our respective happiness. You should even have heard about the rumors about me. Yes, brother Miss Cap, but what can we do? Dad is very optimistic about you and is talking about your future, and those things are hard to avoid. What I can guarantee is that I will treat you well when I'm at home. Although it is a bit unfair to you to say this, the nickname the girls gave me is indeed very appropriate. Flower General, he. Chapter 485, Pious Little Katya. Solovyov was still talking about this issue very seriously. If he was not so good at fighting, he would probably always be regarded as a gigolo. After all, he was always with young ladies of higher status than himself. Madame Rakemia was a wealthy young widow. Although she had a good reputation, her personal life did easily arouse other people's topics. Of course, there was an advantage. That is, when he was with Larissa, no one would think of this. But for little Katya, it was not so fair, so Solovyov still had to make some guarantees. Since some relationships really could not be cut off, and there might even be more in the future, Solovyov thought that this girl would have some opinions, but he did not expect her to be so frank. What can we do? Mom tried to refuse Prince Potemkin. I knew about this when I was a child. There are also things in the palace. Even His Majesty is not like that to Her Royal Highness the Queen. Brother Miss Cap, you have been on duty in the palace for so long, you should know it. Therefore, I don't expect too much. When you are with me, you must love me well, and I will be satisfied with this. I will try my best to be your good wife, and help you with housework. This child is really unexpected, but think about it. Prince Vasily is a Catholic, and his children are still Orthodox. The two sons are okay. Although this girl respects and is filial to her father, she still has a lot of opinions about her father's religious beliefs. Even the eldest brother Prince Vasily recently had a good chat with a girl, just because the girl's family is Lutheran. Little Katya is a little hostile to her. Although it sounds a bit strange, little Katya did it. But she was very pious. Since she was going to be married to brother Miskab, she had to abide by the marriage vows. Solovyov felt sorry for her. Such a good girl, he was so fickle and unworthy of her. Katya, you are so good. I'm afraid it's hard to find a young man in Petersburg who is worthy of you. Brother Miskab, but they are not as promising as you, and they don't value promises like you. I believe in you. Her big eyes are very charming. Blinking her eyes and talking to Solovyov like this really makes people have no immunity. And the two of them are so close. Little Katya is in her arms, the white neck and collarbone, and the smell of the light perfume she uses are really unforgettable. You believe in me, but I can't give you 100% return. How are you in math? Since I have to help you with the housekeeping, brother Miskab, I'm still studying math. I even brought His Highness Nicholas's homework books. Sometimes he even asked me to help him with his homework. This brat. Little Katya shouldn't help Nicholas with his homework, but it was unexpected that he was so good at flattering little master's wife. If you don't like it, I won't help His Highness with his homework. He doesn't have the idea of asking us to help him with his homework. Well, this is in line with Nicholas's stubborn temper. That's good, but since you also like mathematics, I can teach you. Moreover, I wrote a memorial to the emperor, hoping to introduce some mathematics professors, such as the famous Dr. Gauss. I can't learn too advanced things. It would be better if you let me be the housekeeper. Okay, let's not learn such advanced things. Katya, our home has been built. After the wedding, will we live there or in Moscow? That's up to you. You are different from Prince Andrei. You have always been on active duty. Even if you are a captain, I'm willing to accompany you in the forests and grasslands, even in the mountains and deserts. When Solovyov heard this, he felt that this girl was very sensible. To become the wife of a general, you must first marry a lieutenant and live with him on the border, in the forest, and in the desert for 20 years. However, because Solovyov took the fast lane, he still skipped the intermediate steps and took 11 years from a second lieutenant to a general. The young lady of the prince's family can be said to be a princess. She can have such an idea. On the contrary, her concept is very traditional and her character is very upright. Such a daughter-in-law was married home. Although she was not as talented and knowledgeable as Lois's best friend, Countess Sophia, she was very obedient, gentle, and lively. Even if he exchanged the treasure house of the Persian Shah and the harem of the Ottoman Empire, he would give the envoy a piece of Zaporo's high incision and then kick him in the ass. Speaking of mountains and deserts, Solovyov was a little moved. You girl, I won't let you suffer. Of course, we have to consider the feelings of little Katya, and some words cannot be said so bluntly. He stroked the girl's back. What was surprising was that she looked so slender, but her back had a lot of muscles. Obviously, she practiced dancing very hard. Although ballet dancers are always slender, such roses still have thorns, even if she is so gentle. Good Katya. As for the girls and Pierre, they were watching from the side. Although Pierre was honest, he knew that he could not be a kerosene lamp, so he did not get too close. The girls were more concerned, especially since all of them, except Natasha and Sonia, had some friendship with Solovyov. It seems that Flower General really likes Katya, and he has been with her for such a long time. Natasha was very curious about this. She was also quite gossipy. She only watched her brother and cousin kiss in the greenhouse once, but she was more concerned about the affairs of her good sisters. There was always some clue about Potemkina and Rybopir's affairs. After all, Catherine's lover was promising, and Princess Yusupov's attitude softened. No matter what family background she talked about, she couldn't compare to a promising son-in-law. As for little Katya, although her fiancé was more philandering, he was handsome and good at fighting, and he was also an aristocrat from a merchant family, and her own family background was relatively high. Although she rarely saw Solovyov's sister Yulia, Natasha also knew that it was a good future for the brother. Even if the sister was still in the girls' school, she could find a way to arrange a good marriage in the future. Sonia and her brother are probably like her now, always having some fantasies, looking forward to the future, but also a little afraid. The more advanced stage of human fear may be the fear of the unknown. However, she should have a better one. Pierre is the richest man in Moscow, and his wife will cause trouble one day. Of course, Pierre and Natasha will not realize that fate will be so interesting. Potemkina watched Solovyov and little cat eye become more and more intimate. Natasha mentioned it, and she paid more attention. If her Sasha could be here, she would not be given a lot of cat food. They are all watching, brother Miss Cab. But we are getting married too, and because of some unexpected circumstances, there will be foreign guests coming from St. Petersburg, who will come to Sparrow Hills. Marquis Caulaincourt, he is the French ambassador to St. Petersburg, replacing General Savary. As you know, my aunt is the Queen of France, so there will inevitably be foreign guests. As for, he said this about the guest list. Although little Katar was not such a vain girl, and was born in the famous Dolgorukov family of Rurik's paternal lineage, and Moscow was founded by her ancestor Yuri Dolgoruki, but the guests who came to her wedding were really important. In addition to the French guests, there were also guests from many places, as well as Solovyov's relatives and friends in the army, and several senior brothers and their families. Of course, it also included Miloradovich, who is still a single nobleman. He recently returned to Kiev to continue to be the governor. His junior brother was getting married, so he would naturally come. Just this Russian army Lenup, if arranged and combined, can fight Napoleon again. With so many guests, it is no wonder that they have to hold the banquet in the villa sold to Prince Yusupov in Sparrow Hills. Prince Yusupov is also an old neighbor of the Solovyov family. Even the two large official residences of Prince Yusupov in Petersburg are not far from the two houses of the Solovyov family. This place was originally owned by little Katar's father, inherited from his grandfather. It's really unexpected, brother Miss Cap, that there will be so many guests. I dare not send more invitations, otherwise more people will come, including veterans of the Selenge regiment. I heard that Vasily Vasilyevich used to serve in the old Selenge regiment. Dad did serve there. I also heard that my father and your father knew each other in Crimea. Not to mention, Baron Sergei's lame leg was exchanged in that war, and he had to retire with the rank of major. Yes, but my father also serves the old prince's family. After all, General Grushatsky is the old prince's uncle. Yes, he is my uncle, or the eldest uncle, who is the head of the family. As for the status and title, Solovyov's biggest shortcoming is probably that his family is only a baron. But there is an uncle in France who sells titles wholesale, which actually makes up for this shortcoming for him. In addition to a commander-level medal of the Legion of Honor, Baron Sergei will also be awarded the title of Count of the French Empire. But this title sounds very strange, Imperial Count of Numidia, which has a lot to do with his stepmother. Later, Russia will upgrade their family's title level accordingly and recognize them as Count Sergei Solovyov of the Russian Empire in the Velvet Book. However, Solovyov's own title is also a small problem. He hoped that he could get a title based on his military exploits, just like his mentor, Marshal Suvorov. The first title of Count Renik, not a title that was given wholesale by his uncle. Alexander had already considered this aspect. After all, Solovyov was his favorite general, just like Paul's care for Bagration, so there would naturally be corresponding title adjustments. That's it. When I marry you, you should also be a countess. I don't care about any title or wealth. It's not that. Little Katar bit her lip and said Helen Kulagina, which shows that this woman really has a bad reputation in Moscow and St. Petersburg. Even this unmarried girl doesn't seem to think that she is Pierre's wife from a point of view, but she talks about her maiden name. This also shows that Pierre is still widely sympathized in Moscow. You care about your personal happiness, Kataya. I understand. Can I give you a kiss? Kiss your forehead. Obviously, this is still regarded as a sister, but before marriage, little Kataya's face was burning and flushed. You are not having a fever, are you? Solovyov used his fingers to probe her armpits and was relieved to confirm that there was no problem. This child is pious and innocent, and it is really hard to hurt her emotionally. If it was the old witch in the Saltykov family, the son who married her might be from a high family. Prince Nicholas was the tutor and the regent of the empire when the emperor went to war, but the atmosphere in his family was very strange. Although Solovyov had a rich emotional experience, he still took his feelings seriously, and it was a compensation for what he owed to little Katia. Of course, the girls saw all his actions. If they were not the guards and hussars, there would be no whistling and cheering, and they just giggled. They were already engaged, and other lovers would kiss each other at this time, but he was reserved here. In short, he still cherished this little girl very much. When he thought that she would be his wife, Solovyov also vowed in his heart to treat her well. For him, in his personal life, having such a wife is very satisfying, and there is no need to be picky. Brother Miss Cap, not only the forehead, but also, little Katia wanted to kiss like this, and she even stood on tiptoe. Okay then, although she is a little girl who is still wet behind the ears, it is still a great experience. Especially she will be his wife. That night, Solovyov and Pierre also visited Prince Yusupov's official residence in Sparrow Hills to discuss the specific matters of the wedding with the future father-in-law. Prince Vasily was naturally very satisfied with the future son-in-law, no matter from which aspect. He was also very careful in doing things. As for the title issue, Napoleon's efficiency was obviously very high. He approved the new title of Baron Sergei on the way, which might be more face than call and courts coming to Moscow to attend the wedding. In the end, the nephew's wife should not be at a disadvantage, especially since the other party's family is also a famous family of Rurik. As for entertaining relatives and friends in Sparrow Hills, the invitations have been sent out, and they also need some time to gather in Moscow. In this case, the show will really not be small. Prince Vasily even thought about marrying his sister, who he did not get along with, to Praskovia in the Musin Pushkin family. He hoped that she would not cause any trouble. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 486. Guests arriving from all directions. Vasily Vasilyevich, your suggestion is not wrong. Guests still need to be invited. However, if invitations are to be sent, the composition of my relatives and friends is also complicated. The situation is awkward, because he has 3 waves of French people. Napoleon will send Marquis Caulaincourt and General Savary, the Duke of Richelieu and Langeron, who are royalists, as well as a group of expatriates and the masses who come to work. The political spectrum is very complicated. Iraq and Iran cannot be put together, and Squid and Jordan cannot be put together. In addition, there are other relatives and friends. He involves too many people here. From representatives of the Russian Emperor to soldiers of the Selenge regiment. As for the relatives of little Katia, if they were to sit in the church, it would be very monotonous. Except for the closest relatives, those with titles, would be embarrassed to show off, even if they were counts. The civil servants who entered the venue had to be at least 4th-class civil servants, and the officers had to be at least colonels. Perhaps this was the difference in family background. The girl from the famous family of Rurik and the young man who was promoted from a low-ranking officer to a general had different relatives and friends from both sides. Even according to Solovyov's idea, the nobles of St. Petersburg and Moscow were probably considered as little Katia's maternal relatives, and his side was mainly small nobles and foreigners. If Bagration and Miloradovich were also counted, they should also be considered foreigners. One was a black-faced man from Georgia, and the other's ancestor was from Bosnia and Herzegovina. In addition, he was a black-hearted disciple of Suvorov, and he was really black in character. It doesn't matter. They are all guests, so we have to make arrangements. Prince Vasily is an optimist, and is very enthusiastic in entertaining guests, but the family business is indeed not very good, and the expenses are not small. But the expenditure is a problem. We should control it a little. Solovyov also knew that, even if his father-in-law sold the Sparrow Hills manor, the expenses would still be huge. Compared with Count Vorontsov's sale of the manor, to pay off his officers and soldiers in the future, the expenses would be very wasteful. After all, it was just a wedding. But for Katia, my daughter is going to be your wife, and we can't owe her. The father-in-law said so, and it was really hard to save money. He was used to being thrifty. The nobles lived a life of prosperity and wealth, which was different from him. It was not only Solovyov who was born into a small noble family who was not used to it. Larissa, who was born in Baden, and was also a princess of the elector's family, was not used to this luxurious life when she came to Russia, not to mention Queen Louise, who was visiting St. Petersburg recently, and whose daily life was more like that of a commoner. The scene, it must be a scene. And the band had to be set, the ingredients for the table, the chefs who could be hired in Moscow, the tenors who were needed to make wedding dresses and formal wear, the jewelry to be worn, and the jewelry merchants who had been bought. The existing family heirlooms needed craftsmen to maintain them. Well, none of them could be missing, and the more prominent branch of the Dolgorukov family was going to marry their daughter, so the dowry could not be missing. Solovyov wanted to ask his father how this happened, but he had to give his father-in-law face, so he could only acquiesce. In addition to these, in the manor of Sparrow Hills, although it had become the property of Prince Yusupov's family, he was willing to help with the reception, and the cost of the guest rooms was saved. There was no need to entertain guests in the old house in Moscow, but if there was no room for them in Sparrow Hills, some of the guests might have to be arranged there. In addition to these, Pierre was also willing to help his friends, and his official residence on Smolensk Street could also entertain guests. Thank you, Pierre, you are always so hospitable. If all the nobles in Moscow were like you, maybe things would change. Prince Vasily said this. Of course, compared with Vasily of the Kuragin family, he was obviously very sincere, the kind of old noble who was kind and generous. How should I put it? Pierre, you have always been dedicated to your friends, which is of course good, but sometimes you have to see clearly and can't look at people without glasses. Solovyov said this, probably because Pierre had misjudged people several times before. It was good that he was willing to help without having to entertain guests in his official residence. Fortunately, Dolokhov, the adventurer and dangerous man, went to the Caucasus recently, otherwise it would bring some trouble. At this point, Prince Yusupov came over and said, "Count, what do you think of this dish? Although it was hard, it was very effective. This steak is very good, but the seasoning is a little too much. But this is fresh food, raised on a ranch near Moscow, and it was transported here very quickly, and it was served shortly after being slaughtered. Of course, it is very fresh, and there is no need for so much sauce and seasoning. Isn't that the original taste of the food?" Yusupov said this to avoid some small problems. There is no need to trouble Pierre to help. In addition to the guests who want to stay at home, there are also some who will go to their respective residences in Moscow. It is not winter, so there is no need to make a fire. In addition, wild animals in autumn are fat and strong, which is also suitable for hunting activities. Solovyov likes to hunt deer. In the countryside of Rouen, hunting may be more fox hunting and wolf hunting. In some places, bear hunting is popular. In the Sparrow Hills area, there is naturally no large prey to hunt. Prince Yusupov invited everyone to go to the Istrensky area, but everyone else was here to hunt. The only guest was an active duty soldier, and he was the groom who was about to arrive for the wedding. Solovyov went to Mozhaysk or Istrensky to survey the terrain. You're still surveying the terrain at this time? Yes, Vasily Vasilyevich. I always feel that the terrain of the Smolensk Road and the old Smolensk Road from the west is relatively flat if you march from west to east. My child, you've been in the army for too long. When I met you, you were an active duty officer. You haven't enjoyed the life of the manor until now, have you? Yes, it's been like this for a long time. It's rare to take a vacation. If I take a leave to go home, my family will move to Petersburg. Anyway, we live at home. This distance is equivalent to not taking a leave. It's moving to the manor after getting married, which seems like a more formal vacation. You should experience this kind of life in the manor more. It's not good to be tense all day. Relax your body and mind and enjoy this kind of life. Since it was his father-in-law who said so, Solovyov couldn't refute it. Moreover, he looked at the terrain of the Istrensky area and thought it might not be useful. Even if the French really want to attack in the future, it is still a question whether Mozhaysk should fight. And worrying like this now is just worrying about nothing. It's better to enjoy the fun of hunting, and you can see guests coming to Moscow from here. Especially the guests from Smolensk. Admiral Apraksin, who used to be Solovyov's superior, returned to Moscow from this road. After all, he is also a famous nobleman in Moscow. In addition to him, the guest that Solovyov and Pierre are waiting for is Andrei. He wrote to say that he will come with Lisa in the next 2 days. As for the logo on the carriage, Andrei's family has always been low-key, but the logo is relatively simple. When the group was resting near the hunting ground, they waited for Andrei's carriage. However, the women stayed in Sparrow Hill and did not come here, so except Lisa who came with Andrei, there were no other ladies here. However, Andrei's meeting with Natasha was not a kind of meeting. After all, his wife was still here. Lisa, we heard about your situation, and we were worried about you. I'm fine, thanks to the doctor you recommended, Miss Han. I'm just a little scared when I think that my son was pulled out of my stomach like a carrot. I'm afraid that he might be hurt. But Carla is growing well, you don't have to worry. Yes, it's hard for the mother to be so big when the child is born. When Andrei spoke, he still looked cold on the outside but warm on the inside. On the surface, he was like this, but his heart was full of emotions. As for Lisa's bulging belly, it was naturally because she was pregnant again. I also want to congratulate you on having another child. Although the second child is a bit painful, it won't be like the first time. As the saying goes, everything is difficult at the beginning. Miss Ham, you haven't been married yet, so in this regard, of course, since Solovyov was called Flower General by the girls, it's not just because he is handsome, but he is also emotional. But when he speaks, he is naturally restrained. After Andrei said this, Solovyov continued, who made my family run a business that also has this business? If you need medicinal herbs for pregnancy, a batch of new medicinal herbs have been imported from the market in Kayakta recently, especially Eucommia ulmarides, which has some gum threads. When it is broken open, this kitten rubber tree is still very valuable for medicine. I have also thought about introducing it for planting, but it is difficult to obtain seeds. Then you can also find young branches or use root grafting. Obviously, in addition to Mariah's math class and lathe craftsmanship at home, the old Duke Nicholas sometimes does gardener's work, which affects Andrei. After all, he knows gardening knowledge. Moreover, as a master, you have to know something about running a manor in the countryside. Andrei, you reminded me. And according to the pharmacopoeia I know, the Chinese also have a pharmacopoeia of herbs, and even started botanical classification before Linnaeus, but the progress has been slow. Compared with our combination of theory and practice, their empirical science has more frontline experience and even unique features, but some practical reasons have led to theoretical research and experimental research not keeping up. Your time is really tight, but after getting married, you have to take good care of your wife. After returning from the expedition, I have also thought about a lot, always returning to the family and spending more time with my family. Yeah. But I just can't sit still. I don't know what results the emperor can get from the Chinese emperor for the envoys he sent to China this time. Solovyov changed the previous way, that is, taking advantage of the Russian merchants' cargo yards in Beijing and regularly sending merchants to cross the border from Kayakta. In terms of diplomatic means, he is more like the Bourbon messengers in the past, but the French have always used missionaries to convey messages, and even invited the Prince of the Nguyen dynasty of Vietnam. If children can travel across the ocean to the Palace of Versailles, it is only natural for Russian merchants to serve as messengers. As for what Emperor Jiaqing would think, Solovyov had no idea, but considering the emperor's fear of trouble, he might even allow it. After all, this is not a war, but just inviting an old doctor to open a business, and it is asking for a grant. Besides that, it is also an opportunity to clarify misunderstandings. In addition to the letter of credence, there are also portraits of the Russian royal family. I'm afraid that after reading them, Jiaqing will suggest that Alexander go to the temple of Guanyin Bodhisattva to pray for a son. Your next generation of daughters is a bit too many. According to Chinese standards, they can all marry legitimate princesses abroad. Maybe the king emperors really viewed the kinship relations in these European countries in this way, or they might be based on the standards of the spring and autumn period and the warring states period. Are you really asking for a clinic? I want to grow medicinal herbs. I think some places around dryers are very suitable. Some shady places are more suitable for growing ginseng. The places in my hometown are fertile and more suitable for growing medicinal herbs. There is a reason for this. The requirements for land used to grow grain are not as high as those for growing vegetables. The growth of medicinal herbs requires even more stringent requirements on the land. Andrei looked at Solovyov and just smiled. He was already a count who got his title from the French. He had made so many great contributions on the battlefield, but he still couldn't forget his family's craftsmanship. Even Count Stroganov, who came from a royal merchant family, didn't have this. After they gathered here, they should return to Moscow. Guests have arrived in the past few days, and even the Duke of Richelieu, who was far away in Odessa, arrived relatively early. I hope nothing will happen, Solovyov thought, but the royalists in Russia are obviously much better than those dangerous elements in Britain, who are thinking about overthrowing the Paris regime all day long. Duke Richelieu and Langeron came here to have a feast and congratulate. Given the friendship between Langeron and Solovyov, it was natural that he should do so. After all, the Order of St. Andrew the Apostle, the highest military honor in Russia, was earned by this guy. Chapter 487. There should be background music for getting married here. Most of his friends are married, so this kind of gathering is unnecessary. Thinking about Pierre's wife, Solovyov didn't want to arrange it at this time. Therefore, he slept very well the night before his wedding. If he were on the battlefield, he would have kept his ears perked up. And who are the guests? If you really make a list, it would be enough to write a chapter or two. After all, Russian names are long. At the same time, the weight of these guests is there, and the gifts they brought will naturally not be few. Although it may be an inconspicuous little object, the value will not be low. Of course, the important thing is the wedding, but little Katyr is only 16 years old. Although early marriage and early childbirth are normal among Russian nobles, for Solovyov, he is a shell and always. But the gendarmerie will not care about these. You have to know that when Alexander and Larissa got married, one was 16 and the other was only 15. The Russian royal family was always anxious to have children. They even consummated their marriage when they were middle school students. Then there was a series of soap operas in the Russian court. The relationship between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law has always been a difficult problem to solve. Solovyov has a stepmother, which is not so difficult to deal with. To him, she is like an older sister. Yulia and Katyr are of the same age, and she treats them like sisters, although there is also a 15-year age difference between them. This is always a good thing. There won't be too many troubles at home, and Katyr's family background is really strong. Whether it is Moscow or many surrounding cities, if you talk about it, they are all deeply related to the Dolgoruki family. And the Dolgoruki family and the Volkonsky family, as well as the Andrei family with a letter difference, are also relatively close. Solovyov was really protected by the top nobles in Russia. If Ivan the Terrible had not cancelled the inheritance rights of the branches of Rurik's paternal line after the fall of Boris Godunov, no family would be willing to step forward. In the end, a vote was held, and the Romanov family of Rurik's maternal line was favored. I'm afraid that the war of succession to the throne in Russia will be more troublesome. The two fake Dmitri are already very troublesome. Fortunately, the handover was relatively smooth, but the Dolgoruki family was closer to the descendants of Peter the Great. They suffered a lot during the reign of Queen Anna. Several branches that once held military power were demoted and deposed. It was not until the reign of the Queen that they gradually revived. The Sparrow Hills Manor was developed when Katyr's grandfather was the commander-in-chief of Moscow, when his military achievements were at their peak, but now it has also been transferred to Prince Yusupov. It stands to reason that the old house would not be sold unless there was a serious economic crisis, but Prince Yusupov gave too much, enough to fill Prince Vasily's debts, and even more money to buy a dowry for little Katyr. Even compared to the weddings he attended in Gatchina and the Winter Palace before, Solovyov also found that the little fairy came from the family of Catherine I, the daughter-in-law of Peter the Great, and was considered an Avorish family. There were already several aunts who came to help. The relatives of the Dolgoruki family, who were famous for military merit, who came to support the family, sitting on the side of the bride, were already outrageous. As for the people sitting on his side, they were basically foreigners, and even Queen Louise sent Clausewitz to represent him. After Kutuzov entered the venue, he thought about it and saw that Suvorov students and the son of the Grand Marshal, Arkady, were sitting on his side, so he also came over. This old guy came today and brought gifts. Mishap, I know you like weapons. This is a Damascus knife I captured when I was young and fighting the Turks. I have always kept it carefully. I was shot twice in the eye for it, both from the same place. I know everything about you, and thank you for your gift. Solovyov pulled Kutuzov aside and spoke to him again. Today's main dish is prepared by the chef invited from Petersburg. You must come and enjoy it. Of course, you have good wine and food here, otherwise I wouldn't have come so far and specially applied for a petition to lift the ban on staying in the manor. But I think the emperor still needs you and can't let you stay in Kiev forever. I'm afraid that if we encounter trouble in the future, you will still have to do it. You are a good talker, but you young people are doing well. The 3 apprentices that Alexander Vasilievich cares about the most are all very capable. Speaking of which, with his age, he is more like a master uncle in the Suvorov family, just like Zaubotom. With his characteristics of sometimes being disrespectful to the elderly and having fun, it does mean something like that. Solovyov thought so, but he would not pass by Niugia village, let alone an old Taoist priest. Just an analogy. After speaking, he sat aside, saw Andrei and his wife first, and went over to talk to them. As for little Kataya, she also had a group of aunts and uncles coming over, including General Grushatsky and his wife, the old benefactors of the Solovyov family. If the gifts were placed here, they would probably be piled up like a small mountain. As for the increasing number of guests, in addition to the blessing of bread and salt, the Archbishop of the diocese was here to witness the marriage. The manor in Sparrow Hills only had a small church. In order to witness it, the Archbishop had to do it at the door of the church. The oath was nothing more than my life partner and my only love. I will cherish our friendship and love you, now, in the future, and forever. I will trust you and respect you. I will laugh and cry with you. I will love you loyally, whether the future is good or bad, difficult or comfortable. I will accompany you through it. Just as I extend my hand for you to hold tightly, I will give my life to you. So please help me, my lord. Such words, but when Solovyov mentioned this, he always felt that he owed little Kataya. But they had made it very clear before the marriage, so this was not a big problem. When they took the oath, if Solovyov had noticed, he would have seen Madame Rukania sitting there wiping tears. Because of Prince August's incident, she was somewhat afraid of remarriage, so she did not plan to get married. Solovyov did not meet her ideal husband standards, but was just a good friend and a good lover. Now he had entered the palace of marriage, and she was just the hostess of the Petersburg Literary Salon. If she got married, she would probably need a man with a high level of education, who was not a soldier, preferably a diplomat, who could accompany her for a long time, or at least someone who could visit her regularly. At this time, it would be right to directly report Shabdorian's ID number. As for exchanging rings and formally taking the oath of marriage, Solovyov looked at little Kataya carefully again. He himself was wearing a general's uniform of the guards, with medals all over his chest, and he also brought honorary weapons. At the age of 26, he could already put on 2 rows of medals, which was also a remarkable achievement. The wedding dress that little Kataya wore was pink, which suited her age, and made her look more lively. After all, black is too impactful, and except for the fact that it represents eternal love in Spain, it is more or less white in other places. If the main trend in the middle of this century was still the aunt, white wedding dresses might be popular. The color of the bride's dress was not so uniform during this period. Even little Kata's mother wanted to match it according to the one she wore when she first got married. But because it was rather rustic, not trendy, and not the right color, she gave up. As for the jewelry, it looked very light. She wore family heirloom jewelry, not diamonds. Although diamonds look beautiful and hard for a noble family that has existed since the Varyak period, they may not like this kind of gemstone. Instead, the heirloom rubies and sapphires are more pleasing to the eye. Different times, different tastes. Although Kata's Aunt Praskovia is a greedy old woman who will not refuse shiny things, she has no feelings for diamonds. She also hopes to get her niece's set of family heirloom jewelry, and she looks at it with greed. But Prince Vasily is the heir of the family, and for the sake of his beloved eldest daughter, he is willing to spend the dowry. So he took out a set of family heirloom jewelry, a complete set. It may not look so dazzling, but in terms of history, it is still a treasure from the Tsarist period when the Grand Duchy of Moscow began to claim to be. She can't covet these things. The occupation of Count Bruce's property has already caused many nobles to criticize. This matter is too extreme. If there is a dispute with her brother Prince Vasily, it will probably take some time. Just think about it. The Musin Pushkin family is already a little distant from the Pushkin family. Their family is also a famous noble family, but there should be no such son-in-law in the family. Regardless of whether it was the youngest son of the old witch or Solovyov, or the other candidates proposed for little Kataya, they were either young generals with some promising future, or children of prominent families. For Prince Vasily, a son-in-law who could fight, might be a half-good son who could be relied on more. If a fight really broke out, Solovyov, a general who had a relationship with the Tsar himself, and his 3 younger brothers, might be even harder to mess with. When Solovyov was holding little Kataya's hand, he noticed the greedy eyes coveting something with his peripheral vision, but it was just an intuition. Now it was the wedding, so he didn't care about it. The important thing was to get married and live a happy life. Katalinka, can I kiss you? Now you are my little wife, and I'm your husband. Of course, Miss Kat. After becoming a formal couple, little Kataya's identity also became Countess Solovyova. Between husband and wife, these things are still very clear. Now that they were officially married, the church would ring the bells and people would applaud. As for the part of returning to the house, it seemed more Roman, with hands warming by the fire, and jumping over obstacles. Since it was the place of 7 hills in the Third Rome, there were some places that could not be avoided, and these traditions were there. As for the 2 of them returning to the guest room prepared for their wedding, well, this was also the general process. Speaking of which, Solovyov had many lovers, but little Kataya, his wife, was the first real girl he had come into contact with. Even if she was more ambiguous with him, Maria might be a Russian Grand Duchess, but her bloodline mainly came from the German princes, but she had a little Romanov blood. It was really amazing, and after little Kataya took off her wedding dress, because she had to entertain guests later, she obviously had to change clothes. Do you want me to help you? Solovyov put his hand on her shoulder, and little Kataya blushed immediately. It's too bad at this time, Miss Kat. Let's wait until the evening. Well, I'll ask Yulia and Adela to come and help you. Sonia is too young, and my sisters are even younger. They can't help much, and they may even cause trouble. But it's okay to ask them to come to play at home. After all, this girl is still young, and always likes to play. As for little Kataya, after changing out of her wedding dress, she changed into a traditional Russian dress. In St. Petersburg, Solovyov had only seen Alexandra's portrait at the age of 6 wearing this kind of clothes, which is really rare. It was Peter the Great who did a lot of things to change customs, and the Tsar himself took the lead in imitating the French, so the frequency of traditional clothes in the upper class was much lower. But after she changed, she still looked very beautiful. Young and beautiful girls, as long as they are not wearing strange clothes, will look very good in any combination. It is inevitable that people will feel, "Madam, you are so beautiful," just like. That's about it, and there are so many guests to entertain today. Although the Dolgorukov family has lived in St. Petersburg or abroad for a long time, they also have a considerable number of relatives and friends here, and a large group of officers from Solovyov's side really came. If there weren't so many people, the old soldiers of the Selenge regiment would probably come too, and even come to make trouble. But there was nothing they could do, so they could only entertain them separately in the barracks, which solved the problem. When they went out hand in hand and came to the banquet, they could also find that, although there were many hostile forces at the scene today, everyone got along well, and no expected embarrassing incidents occurred. Even Caulaincourt was originally a nobleman of the Bourbon period, and he had a good chat with the Duke of Richelieu and others, which was also a basic operation in diplomatic occasions. It's good that everything is fine. Solovyov still wiped his sweat. The next thing, in addition to entertaining guests, is probably the matter between the young couple. Chapter 488. The destination of the wedding trip is Crimea. When entertaining guests, the couple still had to come out together, especially in the auditorium of Sparrow Hills Manor, where a play would be performed. There were always some programs before the banquet officially began. However, the play performed was Iphigenia specially, provided for the Russian royal family. Is it just the tone of this story? The first time it was performed was when Paul visited Europe after Russia defeated the Turks in the Russo-Turkish War. After returning, it became a program that the royal family often watched when they went to the theater. Compared with the later literary and artistic works related to Crimea, this part may be more implicit when declaring sovereignty, and the implicitness is a bit abstract. If it is changed to glorious Sevastopol, the enemy must never get it in the future. The outline of the story is that when Agamemnon's daughter was sacrificed, the moon goddess Artemis felt pity for her and swept the girl to the moon temple in Taurica to be a priestess. Later, Agamemnon was murdered by his wife and a pretty boy. After his son avenged him, he came to Taurica and finally recognized the brother and sister on the altar. Thinking about the title of little Katar's grandfather, plus the military experience of old Father Sergei, it seems very appropriate. Today's performance is really good, and your wedding is very unique. Marquis, you are serving as an ambassador in Petersburg, which makes us happy. At least you are a suitable person to speak up, well educated and knowledgeable about diplomacy. It's just that I'm not a diplomat, and I may not be of much help in improving the relationship between France and Russia. No, you are enough. When performing a drama, there are still several small boxes in the theater of such a manner. Solovyov also knows that this time is always more suitable for negotiation, secret diplomacy, but he is just a distant nephew of the French queen, and there is no blood relationship. He is taking advantage of the relationship between his stepmother and his younger brothers and sisters. As for calling court coming here, it also represents some diplomatic practices. Just deal with it and talk about the traditional friendship between France and Russia. As long as the French don't call, everything is fine. The problem is that Napoleon might come over, and the more troublesome thing is that, although Aunt Josephine's position as queen is stable, she is 44 years old. Not every socialite in Paris is Madame Stael, who can still have children at the age of 46. In other words, as a spouse, this aspect is obviously not guaranteed. At that time, Napoleon will still find a woman to give birth to his children. It is very likely that he will marry with the royal families of Europe. The weight cannot be too light, and the girl cannot be too young. Considering that Anna is too young, the French national gendarmes will come to the door to ask the emperor for an explanation. I'm afraid that the only girl of the right age in Russia is Catherine. The French will not make such a request today, but who knows if Talleyrand will do such a thing tomorrow. Austrian women are still spare tires on this issue. As for Caulaincourt, he is not so open about pimping. Therefore, it is just a joke. After the diplomatic rhetoric, it is more of a personal friendship. I think you should visit Moscow more. The scenery here is very beautiful, and like Rome, it has 7 hills. Have you been to Rome? We knew each other before Qatar, and I got married when she was still a little girl. At that time, Prince Vasily, my father-in-law and his family and I traveled to France and Italy together, and we went to Rome. The connection between Moscow and Rome is nothing more than 7 hills and some inheritance in between. If you meet our emperor, you will know our attitude towards the Ottoman Empire. Constantinople also has 7 hills. Although he was a little self-willed, considering his special identity, he was able to talk to both sides. As for the Ottoman Empire, Russia would temporarily cease fire, which was also a tacit understanding between Russia and France. However, when leaving Petersburg, Solovyov also knew Alexander's thoughts. On the Balkan issue, there must always be room for intervention. He tried to test Caulaincourt for the next step. The biggest area for Russia to expand is the Ottoman Empire, which has also been the main expansion direction since Peter the Great. There is also a sense of mission of the Orthodox Church. A lot of buffs are superimposed. Asking Caulaincourt, who is reliable, actually has an effect. That Sebastiani, when Napoleon went to Egypt, he exposed his target with his big mouth and caused trouble. He had previously instigated discord and let the Ottoman Empire take advantage of the war between Russia and France to start another war. Now I hope he won't make trouble. But compared to Sebastiani, Caulaincourt can be said to be very close to Napoleon. If there is anything here, he can still pass it on. Caulaincourt also understood what he meant. The Seven Hills, this kind of connection, is for Russia to go south to the Balkans in the future. But he is also an old hand. He is a good person, but he is also very good at making jokes. It depends on the agreement between the monarchs of the two countries, isn't it? Seeing this, Solovyov didn't say much, but just mentioned his next plan. We plan to leave Moscow and go to the Black Sea coast after the wedding. However, the Anapa fortress is under the control of the Ottoman Empire. Although our country has tens of millions of serfs, our emperor has always been committed to treating serfs more tolerantly, and the Turks have been engaged in the slave trade, which means that we have to travel to the east coast of the Black Sea without a place to stay. The word sounded strange, but Caulaincourt also knew the general idea. Crimea is a good place to spend the winter. In ancient times, it was the edge of Greek civilization. There was even a long-term trading station in Tanis at the mouth of the Don River. Moreover, it is somewhat related to the repertoire of the first half of the drama. Iphigenia went to Taurica because of the will of the moon god. Well, this riddle is indeed talented. In the diplomatic letter that Caulaincourt sent back to Paris, it can be mentioned that Solovyov and his wife went to Crimea for their honeymoon trip. As for what news was spread out, that is another matter. But France's national policy, like Britain's, does not hope that Russia can get out of the Black Sea bathtub. Moreover, Napoleon had a stronger desire for control, so he might make some concessions on the Baltic issue. However, if Russia wanted to go from the Black Sea to the Mediterranean, it had already given up Corfu in the diplomatic agreement. At this moment, Caulaincourt also wanted to mention this matter. Corfu may be a more suitable place, and it is in Greece. But Solovyov was a general who loved to show off his knowledge, so it would be difficult for him to answer questions about knowledge. If it is Corfu, it is the cause of the Peloponnesian War. I think the emperor should be familiar with ancient Greek literature, especially the biographies of famous people involving Pericles, while the works of Thucydides and Xenophon cover this period, and the scope of Diodorus in Sicily is also very wide. If you put it that way, it is true. The relationship between Athens and Sparta was that when the issues of several island city-states could not be arbitrated, it eventually evolved into a war that lasted for decades, and the expedition to Syracuse was a disaster. This no longer sounded like a riddle, but more like a clear indication. Napoleon, who claimed to be familiar with Plutarch and ancient Greek history books, should not fail to understand the meaning of this, no matter how arrogant he was. Caulaincourt would also convey it, but it was not the main point. Then there was a banquet, and after the banquet, there was the second half of the play. The intermission in between was also convenient for people to go to the toilet and chat, and there was also a banquet at the end of the night. Such was the pomp and circumstance, and there was also drinking at the banquet in the middle. Solovyov, who had always been unable to hold his liquor, was also dragged back by the servants in a daze. His poor alcohol tolerance was tested by a pint of beer before. Even Russians who could drink tons of vodka had the habit of looking down on others if they did not drink after being persuaded to drink, but that was tons of vodka. Mixing all kinds of alcohol, even those with good alcohol tolerance could not stand it. Seeing him like this, but not drunk to the point of falling asleep, little Katyr asked the servants to change his clothes, and she also undressed and changed into a nightgown. As we all know, women's underwear at this time is still empty. For Solovyov, those fun things. He swore by touching the conscience of the Crown Princess Larissa, pinched the feet of the Queen of Prussia, and unlocked a lot of strange French knowledge when he was with Madame Rukania. But he has his own wife. After he sobered up for a while, he still thinks that this kind of spring-loving girl is the best. Little Katyr is still a lively girl, and the distance between the two is not so far. As the lover of the queen and the lady, they always have to be more polite. But it's different here. After all, they are in front of the altar of the church. After being blessed by the archbishop, they have completed the registration of legal couples. Even if the young countess comes from a famous family, she does not need to be bound by etiquette. You are finally sober, Miss Cab. I have already changed it. I asked the servant to do it. You are a good drinker. If it was Dad, it would be very troublesome to serve you. It seems that my father-in-law, if he entertains guests and drinks all day, must also be a professional Russian drinker. As for you, I think you are fine. Although I rarely drink, I can still drink a lot. Well, this should be up to my father-in-law. Is it so? Let me see how it goes. Then he pulled little Katya into his arms. As a couple, it should be the first time that they are so close. Since she is already someone's daughter-in-law, from a lady of the prince's family to a countess, she is naturally more relaxed. Of course I'm fine. You have been lying here drowsy for a while. I have time to take a shower. No wonder, you smell really good, but you still smell a little milk, you little kitten. Such words made little Katya blush a little. Oh. Since I have made a vow, I will cherish you. At this time, wearing a nightgown, your figure is revealed. Indeed, with long legs, Maria inherited the Württemberg-style tallness of the Queen Mother, while little Katya's figure is better proportioned. However, because she often takes dance classes and has to wear dance shoes to practice, she has a bit of a hoe foot, especially when standing on the ground. This is more or less the case for those who have practiced ballet. The feet are more or less deformed, and some scars can be seen. But it must have been a lot of hardship to train like this. I remember you practiced there when we were in Dresden. You still remember that time? I remember it when I was younger, Katya, but there are many things in life that are unpredictable, and I never thought you would become my wife. Also, we are going to Crimea. Where do you think is a better place to go? As he spoke, he had already grabbed little Katya's wrist and ankle. In this way, we can also spend a sweet time as newlyweds. It would be best to go to the seaside. Although I have seen many places, I have never seen the shore of the Black Sea. Besides, my father also said that the scenery on the Black Sea shore is nice. We can also have a house there in the future and go there in the summer. But it is also very hot there, and you have to wear such thin clothes to be able to bear it. Then, he was not very honest and was ready to have a closer contact with little Katya. Then you have to be gentle with me. But when he said this, Solovyov couldn't drive again. He mentioned how he had taken care of Mrs. Rakemia before. Even if little Katya was very good, and even she might be able to tolerate her husband having a lover in her heart, she couldn't be so arrogant. I'll listen to you, but kittens, we should have a lot of kittens in the future, right? I think so. That's the best. The best. This evening, the happiness index of the two of them can still be greatly improved. Even though little Katya is of noble birth, in the Russian noble lady level, even if she has to wait for seniority, she can become a noble lady of the status of state lady in her early 30s, and she can also give her childhood friend the Cross of St. Catherine medal. This is a higher level reward for noble ladies. After getting married in Sparrow Hill, they completed the necessary procedures after the wedding, and lived in the Dolgorukov family's manor for a while. Even if you have a wife, you still have to pay attention to your health. Even if Solovyov has always been in good health, and can cope with a lot of high-intensity staff work and frontline command when fighting on the front line, Katya's waist strength is too good, and she is still young. In this way, the pressure comes to Solovyov. Compared to her, the previous experiences were probably not so intense. They were even more exhausting than the series of battles such as the rearguard at Austerlitz, the Battle of Elor, and the retreat to the Aar River. Therefore, it is better to be more restrained. Chapter 489, the Solovyovs' first visit to the Black Sea. Even if the estate in the prime location of Sparrow Hills was sold to Prince Yusupov, Prince Vasily still owned two large estates around Moscow. The old couple would take their youngest daughter to St. Petersburg, and these places would be left to the eldest daughter and son-in-law in the fall. Even changing the bedroom every day for the two of them could make a schedule. But they couldn't stay here all the time, as the newlyweds also had to travel to Crimea. Their actions were relatively secretive. Solovyov put the medals and uniforms in his luggage, and put on a more ordinary gentleman's suit, but he still wore the Order of the Knights of Malta awarded by Paul. The young countess was also dressed more ordinary, and looked like just a wealthy newlywed couple, but their identities could not be completely concealed. After all, they had to stay at post stations and hotels along the way, and the journey would not be so fast. On the way, they even had time to go to Lugansk and Kharkov, and then go to Kiev to meet Kutuzov and Miloradovich, and also to investigate the situation in the south. During the honeymoon trip, they had to take care of their young, beautiful, and lovely wife, and they could not forget their duties as soldiers, so the speed of the trip was not that fast. Even after arriving in Kiev, the couple had to rest. Solovyov was a little tired from the trip. The first stage of living in the manor was a sweet married life, which was the second stage. And little Kataya, a girl of this age, is at her most vigorous when she just gets married, and Miloradovich saw that his junior brother got married and came to visit him, but now he stayed in Kiev for a while, so he knew it well. Although he has always been a happy bachelor, he has been through many battles and has seen a lot. Mrs. Rakamia's situation is special. Little Kataya was pregnant soon, so she also stopped in Kiev to rest for a while. You two are so happy. It's really enviable. Then Governor General, you should also find a wife. I'm very happy with Miss Kab. He knows so much, and it's so fun to be with him. General Katar Miloradovich is also very good at making girls happy. When we were in Italy, we always needed him to mediate when we wanted to introduce a girl to dance with us. So that's the case. I think the governor is really handsome. However, little Kataya also knew that Miloradovich had not yet decided to get married, so she didn't say too many compliments to avoid stepping on landmines. Miss Hap, you are a count now, right? Yes, it's just a little unexpected. Well, you are actually a relative of Bonaparte, but as a nephew, you have caused your uncle a lot of trouble. But it is precisely because of this that we can be recognized. If it were in peacetime, we would have to go back to visit our relatives, but they are British. The British still blockaded the Atlantic, and the French blockaded the continent, which really hurt each other. However, due to the limitation of productivity, the integration of resources will not be so fast, and Napoleon's own ideas are always too big, and they are beyond the times. The science and technology, productivity, infrastructure and social conditions of the next era should be able to meet his ideas. You can't cross the sea to the Caribbean now. You were lucky that time before. But how is the American territory now? The situation is very good now. I heard that the managers of the Russian-American company have already established a firm foothold there. I think many settlements can be opened on the west coast of America. You should rest for a while. You must go to Crimea too, right? Yes, if we were not a little tired and Kataya was pregnant, we would not stay in Kiev for a few more days. Actually, it's okay for me. It's just that Miss Ka loves me too much. That's inevitable. I know Miss Hap. He attaches great importance to his emotional life. Of course, Miloradovich knew how to speak, so he stopped at that. That's it. We'll stay for a few days, and then we should go to Crimea. Although Kataya is young, she should take care of her health. I rarely feel tired, but now I feel a little tired. I can help you. If you want to go to Crimea, you can live in Bakhchisaray, which was the Khan's court of the Crimean Khanate in the past. Speaking of which, after the senior brothers and sisters came to Russia from the Balkan stage, they first worked for the Zaporizhia Cossacks, so they should be quite familiar with the Crimean Khanate. In addition, their family's manor is in the area of Little Russia, which is one of the core areas of Ukraine. The Khan's court in Crimea. I think it's a good place to visit, but the palace there should be abandoned, right? No, but it's only maintained to the minimum. Before we held the wedding, I saw that Ivan the Terrible's palace was already abandoned, but the governor of the Tavrid province in Crimea should also pay attention to it, at least to maintain it. I'm still very optimistic about it, if it will be an important stronghold in the Black Sea in the future. You still can't do without strategic planning, and you brought your Nilayut wife to talk to me about this. It doesn't matter, Miss Ka does it every night. After all, she is still a little girl, and Kataya blushed a little when she mentioned her husband. This is inevitable. You should rest more, and I will help you arrange the journey to Bakhchisaray and Sevastopol. Miloradovich also understood very well, so he left and did not disturb the rest of the Nilayuts, and also sent someone to arrange the journey in Crimea. It looks like we'll have to spend the winter in Crimea this year. Miss Cap, what will it be like there? I think it should be similar to the climate in Italy. You should have experienced it when you spent the winter in Naples. Is that so? Did you learn about that in geography class? The tutor I hired only taught this kind of course to my two brothers. I was dancing at the time and didn't know much. Okay, I can teach you a lesson, such as origami. God knows whether he was teaching his wife a geography class or a physiology class, but geography and climate are also important to understand. Bakhchisaray is indeed the location of the Khan's court in Crimea, but the last Khan, even if he was related to the Ottoman Sultan, would not have his head left. Along the way, although the couple walked very slowly, they also had enough rest. When they arrived in Crimea, the weather was very good, and Miloradovich also arranged a place for them to live in the manor of a nearby noble. The earliest settlers here were actually Celts, and later Scythians and Greeks arrived here. If you want to be honest, there may be more local Greeks. In addition, there are Tatars from Crimea. From the appearance, the difference between them and Europeans is not very big. Tatar girls also look very beautiful, but they are fatter as they get older, and they are more likely to pass the shelf life than Mao girls. When she arrived here, little Kataya was somewhat jealous of the spectacular figures of the girls here, but she was also very curious. Her husband, nicknamed Flower General, had some romantic affairs with Madame Rukania before they got married, but he was not interested in these girls. She didn't know that, although this husband had a close relationship with the lady, he also needed a sufficient emotional foundation to open his heart. First emotional communication, and then the joy of love. Kataya, I also noticed the way you looked at those girls. When they settled down in Bakhchisaray, Solovyov first arranged for them to rest, took care of his wife at night, and teased her when he massaged her feet. I didn't. Don't worry, I'm not such a shallow person. There must be some emotional foundation. Besides, we are here just to visit the former Khan's court of the Tatars. We will go to Yalta in a few days. I heard that the scenery there is good. We can find a small house by the sea to live in, and spend this happy winter. It's still a peaceful time now, but it's hard to say what will happen next year. I also know that when you come here, you always have to pay attention to local military affairs, so that you can have some plans when you go back to see His Majesty. I accompany you here to let you work with peace of mind and make you happy. Then, she also pulled Solovyov's hand over and let him touch his conscience. Solovyov also fell for this trick, but little Kataya had not grown up yet, and her conscience was obviously not as big as Louis's, let alone the white grapefruit he had seen when Queen Louise was full of maternal love. But thinking about having such a wife, he always felt very happy. Bakhchisaray is actually very suitable for being the Khan's court of nomadic peoples, and it is very convenient to move in all directions of the peninsula. However, in comparison, Sevastopol, Theodosia and Kerch are more suitable as military ports, and they each control several directions. To attack the Ottoman Empire, it is like being with your wife, always finding key places to adjust your feelings, and Crimea is naturally very important. Therefore, on the honeymoon trip here, in addition to the fact that their homes are related to these places, they should also pay attention to the local customs and characteristics. Speaking of which, if Solovyov's father had not been injured in the leg by the Turkish army in the Russo-Turkish War, he would not have retired many years earlier, and then returned home to marry, have a pair of children, and started his ancestral career as a profiteer and manager. The hinterland of Crimea has been a region preferred by nomadic peoples since ancient times, and some coastal towns still look like Mediterranean-styled towns. Under the rule of the Ottoman Empire, mainland Greece faced a sharp decline in population and deserted towns, which also provided ammunition and material for pseudo-history, so that some people said that the Parthenon was fake. Why did Elgin steal those reliefs and be scolded by Byron? On the other hand, in the marginal areas of Mediterranean civilization such as Crimea, even the free-range Crimean Khanate allowed the Greeks here to have a relatively stable social settlement, and they were not exhausted by digging 3 feet into the ground. The rule of the Ottoman Empire, even if it was fought by the Russians and Austria, was considered to be a justice for the heavens. Many Greeks here still wear Greek-style clothes, and it seems that the clothes worn by some girls are very similar in style to the traditional Slavic clothes that little Kataya changed into when she got married. In fact, this is still a cultural influence. In Crimea, the Tatar Khan did not force everyone to convert to religion, so the Greeks still maintain the Greek Orthodox faith, which is the same as the Eastern Orthodox Church. If you go to Ruthenia and some places, there are Eastern Catholics and westernized Eastern Orthodox churches. These people are even more troublesome. Many of them are nails planted by Austria, or they are historical issues. From the steppes and Crimea in southern Ukraine to the Balkan stage in Constantinople, there has been no peace here for more than 1,000 years, since Constantine moved the capital. There have even been Bulgarian Tsars from the Golden family and various strange characters. In the past, when he was in contact with the Dolgorukov family, Solovyov also heard that there was a man who pretended to be Peter III and became the king of Montenegro. Before he was assassinated, he also tried to form an alliance with Russia. It is said that the Eastern Slavic region is abstract. In comparison, there are more things on the Balkan stage. Various nomadic peoples and settled peoples have passed by here. The starting point of the nomadic people is generally in this grassland and the Crimean Peninsula. They can even obtain some urgently needed important materials through trade with coastal areas. In the Crimean Khanate period, they can go deep into the inland areas to rob the various Rurik princes. When the Crimean Khanate was in existence, it was a huge talent trading market, and girls were sold. Even the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire said it was good after inspecting the goods, and there was a queen mother. After they arrived in Bakhchisaray, they settled down and adapted to the climate here before continuing their journey, especially to Sevastopol and Yalta, which are the key to this journey. Moreover, there is something that Solovyov cannot say. He is not a great prophet. As his status rises, he appears as Nicholas' teacher. If I'm not long-lived enough, I should be able to change a lot of things. If I'm long-lived enough, I will have to make some changes to the Crimea area. You know, the fact that the British and French coalition forces were able to fight in the Crimean War was also closely related to the lax coastal armaments. Even when he was in St. Petersburg, he knew that such a key naval and military hub was actually almost undefended. Even if the Ottoman Empire had no ability to fight back, it should not be so lax. Chapter 490. The truce with the Ottoman Empire is only to prepare for the next stage. The Russo-Turkish War, which is now at a truce, is the 7th Russo-Turkish War. Not counting the First World War and the last two Turkish interventions, Russia and the Ottoman Empire have been at war since the First Russo-Turkish War in 1672, when the Ottoman Empire launched an invasion against the merger of Russia and the Cossack hetman. Speaking of which, although the Ottoman Empire was often actively scored by Russia in the future, the first action was launched under their active intervention. Then, except for small victories in individual battles in the Third Russo-Turkish War, when Peter the Great was surrounded by the Ottoman army and had to admit defeat, it was rare to hear that the Ottoman Empire could win on the battlefield. During the reign of the Empress, Russia even destroyed the Crimean Khanate and completely controlled the northern shore of the Black Sea. But there is also an abstract problem. The former territory of Rome, which they control in their hands, is the area of the Kingdom of Bosporus, which was once a Roman vassal. The situation of the Ottoman Empire is that they have never given up on the territory seized by Russia, and Russia has always coveted Constantinople, from Peter the Great to the Empress. In fact, if Russia controls the two straits, it may be a huge trouble for European countries. It is no wonder that, whether it is Britain or France, whenever they are hostile to Russia, they will try their best to instigate the Ottoman Empire to entangle with Russia on this issue. Both sides are very aggressive, so war is inevitable. Solovyov visited the palace of the Crimean Khanate in Bakhchisaray, but he really couldn't appreciate this style. Miss Cap, look at these Persian-style decorations. I've never seen them before. If the Kazakhs and Bukharans could come to St. Petersburg regularly, Kataya, you would be able to see them, and there would be a lot of them. Although those countries are not big, they send hundreds of envoys every time, and they would stay in villas near the summer palace. I once encountered a villa built for them, and the style was very different. Of course, you were still abroad at that time. If there is a chance, we will travel together, and we will also bring the children. If everything goes well, it's like this. After Solovyov got married, he attached great importance to his wife. Little Kataya was 10 years younger than him, and she still had a childish personality, but her tone of voice was more mature. Since he agreed, he would find time in the future to travel abroad, like other Russian nobles. Solovyov also had some friends in the civil service system and the palace eunuchs. They often traveled abroad with their wives and children, and even settled abroad now. That is to say, these officers who have been serving in active service and have not been seconded by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to foreign embassies or observers will only have the opportunity to go abroad when there is a war. In this Khan's court, there is also the tomb of the Khan. Compared with the ancestors of the Jochiulas, the real name of the Golden Horde, who believed in the eternal heaven, it is very easy to find their graves, but there is also a problem, that is, the burial objects must not be so rich. But there is nothing to admire. After all, the Ottoman Empire did not protect the necks of the defeated vassal states and some of the viziers, beks and beys in the interior. The last Khan of the Crimean Khanate was like this, as was the Greek governor of Moldavia, the religious figures of Armenia and the merchants of the Sultan. Before the end of the brotherly friendship of the Ottoman succession law, even the princes could not be spared, and had to be stabbed. Seeing this, Solovyov thought of Edward Gibbon's books and Voltaire's works. He was too familiar with the conspiracies of the Near and Middle Eastern courts. There's nothing to see here. The governor of Tafid province is not here. If it weren't on a major transportation route, it would probably be abandoned. You know, Saray, the capital of the Golden Horde, was severely damaged after the civil war that they provoked after Ujib Khan, and then it was destroyed by Timur's defeat of Toktamish, which completely destroyed the trade routes from the Yuan dynasty to the various khanates of Mongolia. When Timur's own civil war broke out, even the trade routes of the Ilkhanate system were completely destroyed. The Khan of the Tatars naturally prefers to find a place with convenient transportation to establish the Khan's court in such an environment, preferably with a city nearby. Moreover, if the couple wants to buy a house in the future, they will not choose to buy a house here. They prefer to be by the sea. So, the two continued their journey to the seaside and finally arrived in Yalta. The original meaning of this place is coast, and it has always been a place where many Greeks settled. And coincidentally, Solovyov met Major General Komnenos here. His daughters were all in St. Petersburg, and 2 of them were Yulia's classmates and roommates. What a coincidence. Christopher Markovich, why are you here? At this time, you should be in the War Department, responsible for some material mobilization matters. I was just ordered to come here. My 2 daughters went home and mentioned that Yulia's brother got married. I guess this is Prince Krimsky's granddaughter Ekaterina. Hello, young countess. It's also nice to see you here, General Komnenos. Although his last name is Komnenos, he is also a Greek noble recognized by Russia, and his age is about the same as Solovyov's father, but his identity and qualifications have not brought him a significant promotion. Now he is only a major general of the military supply department, usually responsible for the approval of the Black Sea and Caucasus material mobilization documents. He came here for some purpose. Perhaps Erekchev had to adjust some strategies after taking office as Minister of War. The destination of your honeymoon trip is here. It's a good place. The climate is great even in winter, especially with a beach like this. It's just that you came here and you didn't answer my question just now. I decided to bring my whole family here, but as you can see, my wife is pregnant. It's always more dangerous for older women to give birth. After resting here for a while, we will return to St. Petersburg, but not during the coldest time. Yeah, it's not very good for your health. We plan to spend the winter here, and then wait until next spring, to return to our hometown in Ryazan. Go to Ryazan? Yes, but I don't know if my wife's physical condition will allow us to go back there. This is our first child, and it's quite difficult for Katyra at this time. After all, she has no experience and is easily frightened. If it doesn't work, we can only choose to stay here, and I haven't touched the bonus given by the Emperor this year. The bonus awarded for accumulated merits in several battles can even buy an already built property, and Solovyov really dotes on his wife. The bumps on the road often make people feel tired for healthy people. If you buy a piece of land and buy a villa locally, it would naturally be a better choice. And here, Solovyov can also visit many important places in Crimea. He even thought about building a complete Crimean defense system, but in the name of this construction, it is still necessary to improve local transportation conditions, to replenish supplies from Odessa and the Caucasus. It is still possible to transport by land and sea. Little Katyra and Yulia are good friends. They are sisters-in-law and sisters-in-law. They are the same age as the 3 older girls in the Komnenos family. They can play together. Mrs. Komneno saw that her husband had something to do, and she was very sensible. She took her daughters aside and took Katya away. By the way, at this time, we can talk about the main topic. This was in line with Katya's wish. She still liked to play with girls of the same age. Among the 4 girls in the Komnenos family, the first 3 were her peers, and the younger Nastya was only 3 years younger. Christopher Malkovich, I remember that your wife is the daughter of the Duke of Moldova. Yes, you are really a mobile archive, and you know too much about our situation. What I fear most is that one day I will be assigned to the personnel bureau. Staff work is better than this. Having a good memory is not a good thing. It may even keep a deep impression of some things for a long time. But back to the point, the Ottomans are not very friendly to the Greek scenario. Although there are still many such nobles in Constantinople, their fate is not good. If they have any connection with Russia, they may be beheaded with an axe. Yes, my wife's family also fled to Russia because of this. I feel that this war will not end so quickly, and the Turks will definitely not give up. If we withdraw, they will retaliate. So, can we absorb more Greeks? Your idea is not bad, but the Turks should not let people go. They have always been very strict with their population. But I heard that people are less and less in charge, and even Athens has become a small town. Some places are even worse than villages. If this can be called governance, it's really bad. But the war may not be able to continue, right? It shouldn't be possible. I was the emperor's attaché at the time of the peace agreement with the French, so I still know what happened. It also includes that his uncle is Napoleon, and Napoleon is also the second uncle of his son Giuseppe Borghese. In Tilsit, you attracted a lot of attention. The French emperor even acknowledged you as his nephew. Because of this, I know more about what happened. Now is a truce period. Although the Turks rarely abide by the agreement, this does not guarantee peace. This period of peace will last until March 1809. During this period, both sides will turn Moldavia and Wallachia into demilitarized zones. Apart from that, Serbia is currently a protectorate of Russia. As for the Serbs, they fight pretty well. People like me who have been working as adjutants, logistics, and staff all my life, can only be the quartermaster general of a legion, and this is the end. Young people like you have a bright future. I think you can command a legion in the future. You really compliment me. If you want to be a legion commander, you have to be over 30 years old. Now the division commander is a lieutenant general. But it's amazing that you can win the battle against the French. I also want to hear your opinion on what to do with the Turks. Actually, Komnenos was transferred from the Austrian army at the invitation of the Empress, but his career and ability were just so-so. Our Black Sea Fleet and Danube Fleet must protect the ports along the Black Sea. We must also strengthen the defense of the Black Sea coast, build artillery batteries at the ports, and block the entrances to prevent the British from launching surprise attacks. Will the British come? Of course. Russia has allied with France, why won't they change their stance? Moreover, if there is a continental blockade, we will inevitably have conflicts with the British in Portugal and Sweden. Because of Sweden, we may very likely be involved in a war with the British. Before, Sebastiani was able to instigate the Ottoman Sultan to go to war with us as the French ambassador, and the British can do the same. What about the armistice agreement? The Ottoman Empire is different from European countries. Although they occupy the core areas of former civilization, they have never abided by diplomatic norms. Preparing according to the time of the armistice agreement is just to prepare for the next war. They have a large army, but the combat effectiveness is not very good. This is a troublesome matter. The main reason is that there are many people and the cost is low. The disadvantage is that people eat and horses eat, the consumption is relatively high, and the combat effectiveness is really too poor. But the problem is that they are indeed outnumbered, and the Russian army still has to face the terrible road conditions in Wallachia and Moldavia. But don't forget how the Goths and Bulgarians got in. General Komnenos made this statement, which sounded more professional. After all, he was born in the Eastern Roman royal family, although this aristocratic certification might not be very reliable. His wife's family history also claimed that her ancestors had followed Alexius I. If you talk about it, many people rushed to the east of the Roman Empire, which was in Dacia, which was also the Danube border of the Roman Empire. Now to deal with the Ottoman Empire, you have to pass through here anyway, and there is indeed some basis for the future. As for the plan, in fact, Solovyov's inner thought was that the action must be swift and resolute, and he didn't think about the rest. After all, in 1808, there was probably no need to worry about what would happen here, and after he got married, there would always be a period of time when he was more relaxed. Strategic thinking, at this time, became a kind of leisure time pastime. Also, according to the development of the situation, Sweden should be the first to have problems. At this time, he can make some achievements in other fields and accompany his wife. Chapter 491, Archaeological expert Solovyov for a limited time. General Komnenos and his family lived in Yalta because it was where the Crimean Greeks lived. Although the two old neighbors, the Celts and the Scythians, were no longer active nearby, the Greeks had lived here for more than 2000 years, since they landed at Cape Chersonesus, and the culture of Crimea was also influenced by the Greeks. The scattered stones under the Acropolis of Athens should also be found in Crimea. If it is not too coincidental, there may be some archaeological discoveries. After all, even the current ground buildings in Crimea have the characteristics of that period. He had this kind of whim, and when he hugged his wife at night, he had to tell her stories. After all, she was a 16-year-old girl. In this era, she could get married and have children legally, but she was too young, so he had to pat her on the back while telling her stories. In Crimea, both of them still remembered the story of Iphigenia, and the rest was the ins and outs of the Greeks coming here. That's it. Iphigenia and her brother reunited in Taurica and returned to the Greek world together. But I always feel that this story is a little strange. Why must it be Taurica? Artemis obviously has temples in other places. Why is it here? It must be a second or even third creation. You know, in the Iliad, Iphigenia's story was sacrificed by her biological father Agamemnon, and the sacrifice was replaced by a deer by the moon god. The subsequent stories all came from the dramatic creation of the Athenians, and in our time, the purpose is also propaganda. Why is it like this again, Miss Cap? The story you tell is very vivid, but why do the background stories have a purpose? While talking, she was still rubbing in Solovyov's arms, especially rubbing her belly against Solovyov's hand. What a dishonest little mermaid. You have feet. Why do you always move like this, as if you are a fish? Before continuing to explain the story, he also began to caress little Cat Aya, and tried to make her behave in his arms. Miss Cat, you are so smart, just like. Don't say that. Solovyov sealed her mouth with his hand. I don't want to go out and fight for 10 years, and then spend another 10 years coming home, and see someone pursuing my wife at the door. They are also destined to die in my hands, because I'm a good duelist. Things like 6 people being killed in one day can make headlines in Paris, and it is a hot search topic for a month. I wonder if the Paris newspapers have recently described that His Majesty the Emperor recognized an FU in Tilsit. Maybe this is not very important. Cat Eye knew that she had spoken out of turn and actually talked about Odysseus, so she calmed down a little, but stretched out one leg again. Solovyov had to grab her good leg and pressed her down in the quilt obediently, and then he buckled the quilt on his side and wrapped the two of them together. That's good. No matter how dishonest you are, you can't move around. You can only stay in bed with me. Let's get to the point. We mentioned the story of Iphigenia just now. That's because Athens and the Kingdom of Bosporus have always had a good relationship. Athens even imported grain from the Black Sea. The largest share of grain trade on the northern shore of the Black Sea came from the Kingdom of Bosporus. It's really amazing that Athens claims to be a democratic city-state, but it has a good relationship with a monarchy. Then Cupid and Psyche, are they also secondary creations? Yes, the Romans especially like this. But then again, since we are all here, we naturally have to go to Chersonesus and Theodosia. According to the records in those books, the two largest city-states in Crimea are here, and the latter later became the capital of the Kingdom of Bosporus. He really knows a lot, and little Qatar's eyes are full of admiration. A general, he does his job well, he is willing to continue to do other people's work, and he has dabbled in several aspects. It's not that there are no such people, but they are relatively rare. The deeper part of the Crimean Peninsula is the territory of the Scythians. Although the nomads like this peninsula, Their settlements have been in the north since ancient times, and they have chosen a place to roam and trade with coastal cities. If you look carefully at the publications related to the Eastern Roman Empire, the Kherson military district here during the military district system often did not control the entire peninsula, but only in the cities in the southern part of the peninsula. It's interesting. I want to go to the beach. How about we go to Cape Kherson together? Of course, but don't think about swimming. Although the Black Sea is a hospitable sea, the waters here have not been developed, unlike the beaches in St. Petersburg or other places. Besides, if my wife wants to bathe in the sea, I can only watch her by myself. This girl, relying on her good physical strength, is indeed more. What Solovyov is more worried about is that the seawater temperature is dropping at this time, and it is not suitable for swimming in the sea. Besides, I haven't heard of any wife with a fetus in her belly, no matter how many months it is, bathing in the sea in this weather. Larissa was swimming in the Royal Aquarium in the summer, and she wrapped herself up tightly. Although Solovyov wanted to complain about this tiger girl, he didn't know where to start. And to play at the beach, you always have to invite some companions. Little Katyar invited the 4 girls from the Komneno family to play together at the Cape. As for Solovyov, he didn't want little Katyar to be too far away from him, so he told the girls not to play too crazy and just find a place by the beach. As for himself, he did see some ruins on the top of the cape, but they were all broken walls and some Corinthian columns were exposed outside. You girls, you walk barefoot like this, you don't have to worry about hurting your feet. If you hurt your feet, I'll have to find a doctor for you. But it's very comfortable to walk like this, Miss Cap. You are not village girls. You walk barefoot all the time and you are used to the ground. You girls are all raised at home. Even if you have practiced dancing, you don't have calluses on the soles of your feet like those girls. What's more, the sand on the beach nearby is relatively coarse, and it always hurts your feet. After hearing what he said, Katyar and the girls from Komnenos family put on shoes. As for the 5 girls taking a walk, he could also take a shovel and dig up the soil to take a good look. Geological knowledge is sometimes useful, especially the soil quality on the battlefield, which is still very important for building positions. It is also difficult to dig trenches on frozen soil. At that time, the Vauban siege method will have to be transferred to semi-shallow trenches on the ground. As for him, after digging up a section of the soil, he still got some satisfactory results, and even dug out a pillar. It's just that my Greek is too poor. What is written here? Although the girls were all from the Komnenos family, their father had been living in Venice and Austria, and later came to Russia. The girls' Greek level could only be said to be average. Solovyov couldn't invite the pregnant Mrs. Komnenos, so he thought of some ways. After all, he could recognize all the letters, so he copied them down here. You know, epigraphy is not a Chinese patent. In the vast areas of Eurasia, various characters have always been a prominent subject in archaeology. It's just that the Egyptian characters have not been deciphered yet, and the cuneiform characters are only inscribed on the cliffs in the Persian Empire for deciphering. Many ancient characters are still dormant. But as for Greek, no matter whether it is the church or the Greek communities in various countries, there are still many people who can read and write. Even in Egyptian writing, although the hieroglyphics have not yet been deciphered, and Champollion has not yet made a great achievement, the Copts are still using this language, but the hieroglyphics, a relatively special hieroglyphic script, have been lost. However, the obelisks and murals exposed outside can more or less explain something. Therefore, it is not impossible to decipher it. Solovyov could understand some of the words in the passage he got, but he still couldn't understand most of it, so he took it back to show the Komnenos couple. Ah, you are really thoughtful. You still have the mind to do this on your honeymoon trip. Katyar wants to play on the beach, and I can't let her leave my side too far. The environment at the Cape is pretty good. By the way, I also copied these inscriptions. General Komnenos' wife, after all, was born into a high-ranking Greek noble family in the Ottoman Empire. She always knew something, but not much. But she also roughly knew that it was an article written during a sacrifice. It's probably dedicated to the goddess Demeter, and pray for good weather after the sacrifice. Oh, I remember when I asked a tutor to come to my house when I was a child. At that time, we were still in Constantinople. Speaking of it, the Greeks are indeed more worthy of independence, but because there are always too many idle princes in German countries, the major countries generally do not directly unite or send their own relatives to take office in foreign countries. In the future, the independent kingdoms in the Balkans, except for Serbia and Montenegro, the two brothers are local monarchs, and the rest of the monarchs are outsiders. Even if we look at the whole of Europe, the more original royal family may still be the brainless Bourbon. After all, they are a branch of Capet, and the Habsburgs were driven out of the Swiss mountains by their fellow villagers. From this point of view, Solovyov felt that he should indeed plan it. He is not without friends who have connections with Greece, such as Mikhail Dolgorukov. His father once went to Greece to lead the locals to fight against the Ottoman Empire's expeditionary force. As for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, there are also officials from Greece. There are also quite large Greek communities in the Russian Empire, widely distributed in the mountains from Crimea to the Caucasus. Yes, although the proportion of Greeks in these places has been greatly reduced in the subsequent census, if a survey was conducted in 1807, the conclusion would obviously be different. This situation occurred because Turkey and Greece went to war and cleared each other's personnel. In addition, many Greeks in Asia immigrated, some to the Greek homeland in Europe, some to America, and some were even captured in Korea and finally settled in China. In short, they are scattered everywhere. But if you want to find a suitable boss for the Greeks, it is obvious that the Germans cannot be given a bargain. Solovyov thought about this problem, and he seemed to have forgotten that the Queen had considered it before him. Alexander's name can be said to be related to Alexander Nevsky, but Constantine is different. This name is obviously aimed at Constantinople. It's just that the Empress not only failed to give her old lover Prince Potemkin a king title during her lifetime, but her grandson Constantine is unlikely to become the master of this city. However, there are more places to operate on the issue of the Greeks. The Greeks know that the French are not very reliable. Although there are British people who are willing to help, there are more thieves who steal chickens and dogs. It is still the Russians who are more reliable on this issue. The Empress is of German descent. She married to St. Petersburg and was more active than the locals in protecting Orthodox Christians. She is also very active in Balkan affairs. The more troublesome thing is that Austria has come to dismantle the stage before, and there may be Austrians to dismantle the stage in the future. At the same time, France is now stronger. If you really say it, although Greece exists in the name of a republic, it is more in line with tradition. However, at this time when feudal landlords and capitalists are competing with each other, there may be a royal family on top, which is still useful. However, this matter is just a thought. It is better to study the things in front of him. Maybe he can get something interesting. Just like the scribes in the Middle Ages, they may destroy some books and use those papyrus and parchment to record accounts or copy other things, but hide the valuable texts underneath. This winter is not without things to do. Solovyov thinks that Crimea is a place with outstanding people and great writers such as Chekhov in the future. He should do something here and make cultural achievements instead of being remembered as a soldier. Many soldiers in the 19th century were more willing to find a side job for themselves. His job is legitimate. He can plan the ports and coastal areas while surveying Sevastopol, and he can also use a shovel. It's just a pity that there is no excavator now. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.